Hi, welcome to the This is Learning conference. This is the Cloud and Backend track on day one. And I want you to also welcome our first speaker of the day, Aditya Oberoi. You are here to talk about something new, relatively new in ASP.NET Core, the new identity API endpoints that came in version 8. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, what about, other than the title, what else are you going to talk about in more detail?
I think it's going to be an interesting example to look into because after a while, the .NET team brought a solution of this sort for web APIs particularly, a solution which isn't directly coupled to MVC or Razor Pages. And so I think this talk is also going to give people a glimpse of minimal APIs and how .NET supports those right now. So I think it's going to open the doors to kind of showcase what sort of possibilities .NET is able to enable today. And I'm quite excited to discuss more on that and security for sure.
Yeah, I think I read an article about these new endpoints. There's a lot going on in these versions when it comes to identity. Aditya, a few facts about you that you can tell the audience.
Sure, absolutely. So I currently work as a developer advocate at Apparate, which is an open source backend as a service platform. Other than that, I've been actively building with .NET, SvelteKit, and a few other different technologies over the last few years. I will say a lot of my experience was a little more alternative across internships, some contractual work, open source, and hackathons. So a lot of side projects there. But I think it's also given me the opportunity to experiment with a variety of different technologies and contribute back to the community here in India, specifically in the past around New Delhi and now more recently in Bangalore, uh, due to which I have also been a Microsoft MVP awardee. So I'm definitely really excited to interact more with the community members here in the chat. And I do see a few familiar names here, so I'm quite happy and excited about that.
Nice. So you're a Microsoft MVP now?
Yes, I am.
Well, so am I. Hello, fellow
Awesome.
MVP. That's great. Well, I look
Wonderful.
forward to staying in the background watching your talk, and just let me know if I need to help you switch screens.
That would be amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay, so first let me add your slides if you're ready. Good.
Yeah.
And have fun.
All right. Thanks a lot for that, Lars. And hi, everyone, once again. It's really lovely to be joining in and starting off the cloud and backend track for TIL Conf today. My talk, as mentioned already, is going to explore a little, it'll take a glance and an introduction of the new identity API endpoints that have been introduced in ASP.NET 8. If this is your first introduction to ASP.NET or .NET in general, keep this as beginner friendly an example as possible. Um, and so, just before we jump into the topic, I am Aditya. I currently work at Apprite as a developer advocate. I've been active in the tech community around here for the last 5 years now. We jumped into some of what I've been working on already, so I won't repeat that once again. But if someone does want to get in touch with me, reach out, have a conversation after this talk, my Twitter handle and my website link are mentioned on the screen as well. So, even outside of tech, if you just like talking football, pizzas, and communities, I'm always happy to have a chat. Now, as we've mentioned, right, the talk that I have is going to discuss some of the new identity API endpoints that ASP.NET has. I think the first thing probably to discuss here would be what ASP.NET Core Identity is in the first place. because for some folks who might be new to the .NET ecosystem or haven't yet had a chance to play around with it, this might be a new term here as well. So when we talk about ASP.NET Core Identity, it refers to the APIs offered inbuilt within ASP.NET to support authentication functionalities. It has historically provided user interfaces and login functionality for user interfaces within ASP.NET, as well as full user password profile management, as well as roles, claims, tokens, and a number of other facilities like OAuth with a few different external providers as well. And because it's an inbuilt solution, it does help improve developer experience for a few developers at least, because it's going to help increase your pace of development, especially if you're working with standard providers like Google, Microsoft, Twitter, Facebook. And in the past, it's always had support for a UI-based login, right? As the screen as my slide already says. However, there have been recent updates to ASP.NET, which now also expand the facilities to provide an API first authentication experience, which I think is great. That is something that we will be discussing further within my talk as well. Before we kind of get to that, however, there is one misconception that I have heard from a few folks in the past, which I would like to clear at this point. And that is ASP.NET Core Identity is different from Microsoft Identity Platform. When someone talks about Microsoft Identity Platform, that refers to the evolution of Azure Active Directory or Microsoft Entra, as you might have heard of it. And that is also an alternative identity solution that you can use along, within your ASP.NET applications. However, when we do refer to ASP.NET Core Identity, the context here will be slightly different. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Now, within ASP.NET Core Identity, there were a few major improvements that were made when .NET 8 was released later last year. Since that is the current LTS version as well, the new major updates that we kind of came across were the introduction of new APIs to simplify login and identity management for client apps like SPAs and Blazor WebAssembly. And these new APIs are what we will be taking a glance at later today. The second big update that we came across was the enablement of token-based authentication and authorization, which is extremely handy um, when we talk about authentication and authorization for clients that can't use cookies, or any examples that may not be browser first. Like, for example, if you want to use a token from a server-side app to communicate with your API. Because we've had both of these solutions now added, um, it has provided a much better, a more holistic API first authentication experience within um, .NET at least. And I'm just looking at the chat as well. I think Nandini has mentioned that Microsoft Identity Platform is good for .NET native apps. Absolutely, I think it's a great solution for a lot of .NET builders. Um, However, I think the benefit of what ASP.NET Core Identity is that it doesn't lock you into any particular provider. Like, for example, for some teams and organizations, Microsoft Identity is going to work fabulously well. For some, you might want a different external provider. For some, you might just want your authentication to fully be rolled on your own and run in-house, right? So in scenarios like that, ASP.NET Core Identity is going to provide an additional option to you, which I think is great to have for any language ecosystem. So with that, of course, since we've talked about these improvements and the addition of these new APIs, that kind of leads us to the API endpoints that have just been provided, which is going to form the crux of our discussion and our talk today. Now, before we kind of take a live example of how these endpoints work and they can be set up, I do want to discuss some key features, benefits, and drawbacks of these as well. So, when we talk about the new identity API endpoints, some of its biggest additions and features are that it now supports token-based authentication, which is great because you can now effectively use bearer tokens for your authentication, which is especially handy for single page applications and native applications. This does offer a more modern experience as compared to some more cookie based solutions, um, which I think, based on your use case, could be handy. Um, like, especially, I've lately been interacting with a number of teams where they do have client apps connected with a system of microservices where a token could be particularly helpful as well. So it's definitely good to have the option of token-based authentication. Secondly, these new endpoints bring standard uh, and common identity tasks such as registration, login, forgotten passwords, and things like that to ASP.NET Core Identity, which I think is especially handy here because this simplifies the authentication experience. You don't need to develop a number of these functionalities from scratch. And because these are all API endpoints, you can develop a custom interface and user experience for your applications. It adds a few new integration methods to ASP.NET Web APIs themselves. These integration methods include a few different functions which are essential to implement these. And we will be taking a look at these as we go further and we look at a live demo later on as well. And another great feature is that these identity API endpoints can be used directly with Blazor WebAssembly. So the new project, a template for Blazor in .NET 8, integrates these identity API endpoints out of the box, which provides a complete setup for user authentication and management, which I think is great. Some of the strengths and the drawbacks of this method is something that I also wanted to discuss. We'll go through the strengths, these benefits first. So the first benefit, of course, is that because it's an API first experience, it provides far more flexibility for your application, both in terms of how you want to design your UI and UX, um, as well as the fact that these endpoints support bearer tokens additional to cookie-based authentication. You can also use them for far more use cases. Integration has been simplified because of the new methods, the add identity API endpoints and the map identity API functions that we have, and the fact that the Blazor project template now comes with built-in support for these. That definitely simplifies experience for a lot of people. Bearer tokens also actually have certain security benefits relative to cookie-based authentication. Because bearer tokens will make your authentication system stateless, which can reduce the risk of certain types of attack vectors like cross-site request forgery. This normally happens because the tokens themselves, even though in the case of ASP.NET are opaque tokens and not something like JORDs, they can still be read and they are self-containing as far as information goes. So because they're stateless, because they don't need to be stored, it does help enhance security. Like, it doesn't need to be stored in the sense the server doesn't need to additionally store information about each session. And yes, the token-based approach is definitely very suitable for single-page apps as well as native applications on different systems. whether that is on the desktop or mobile. Of course, with this, there are a few drawbacks as well that we will see. I will say a number of these drawbacks are also partially because this is the very first iteration of, well, of the identity API endpoints. It's the first time we've seen these within .NET 8. And so the first is that the API endpoints don't implement OpenID Connect at the moment, which has been widely adopted as a standard now. This does affect interoperability with a number of external identity providers, especially major OAuth providers like Google and, well, Facebook and so on. There can be certain security concerns that we also come across at scale with production environments because, um, well, of course, while each endpoint provides, these endpoints to provide creative flexibility, um, you are also effectively managing your own authentication here, right? You are rolling up your own system, which means you do need to take more ownership of any data, your own database environment, things like that. That can create new challenges that your engineering team or your data team is going to have to manage. There can be additional complexity in certain custom implementations as well. Um, that is often the counter side of increased flexibility, which I think now this is going to be a slightly more opinionated point, but for some teams, building and maintaining their own auth interfaces and workflows might also be difficult, especially for certain very, very small or leaner teams. So it is added effort. And because this certain approach does take away from the traditional Razor Pages approach of ASP.NET Core Identity, which was available in the past already, there is going to be a slight learning curve for existing teams. Now, that isn't to say that this is going to be a difficult learning curve, but that can vary from team to team as well based on knowledge of their current stack and so on. So I think these were certain drawbacks and strengths that people can keep in mind as they explore the new identity API endpoints. And with that, I think what we'll do is we will now take a live. We will try these out live, and going to live implement these in a .NET Web API from scratch. By the way, if you do want to follow along, the only two prerequisites we need here are that you should have .NET 8 installed on your system. And optionally, it would be great if you have the Visual Studio IDE. I do say that because I will be using Visual Studio IDE for my example. However, if you do not have Visual Studio IDE, that is also all right. You can use the CLI to set up your application and then use um, Visual Studio Code or any other development environment that you prefer. So I am just going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here just to switch over. Um, I will also be shifting my StreamYard to a different window, and this is mainly because my primary working window is going to be the one in front of me. So that is just so that I can actually like build this a little in a simpler manner. That also means if I look at the right, I will be looking at the comment section. So you can keep any questions coming in, anything you want to discuss, and I will definitely take a look at them as we go forward. Um, so I've got my desktop environment here. I am going to go ahead and create a new project. Now, one reason I'm particularly fond of Visual Studio as well is that aside from everything else, it does provide a simple interface to explore scaffolding for your applications. I did already select API here, but there are a lot of other applications, whether you want to look at Blazor, whether you want to look at um, Windows applications. Um, they've still got templates for UWP. I just realized it's there. You can create a .NET MAUI app. You can create more conventional web apps as well, whether that is Razor Pages based, whether that is Blazor based. There is a lot of variety that you do get. And I think it's a great idea in its own right. For this one little demo, however, we're going to pick ASP.NET Core Web APIs. So I'm going to go ahead and select that here. Um, just going to change my location where I want this project to be created, and what we will call this is TIL Conf identity demo. So here for my framework, I'm going to select .NET 8. Please make sure to do that if you have multiple .NET versions installed in your system. We'll also keep this configured for HTTPS. You can turn this off at the moment. It's not going to cause any major problems for us right now. And we will make sure to keep open API support enabled. This is particularly handy to document your APIs in general, and it'll actually help us when we test this API going forward. You can, however, also use controllers if you prefer. That is the one good thing about the identity API endpoints. They're going to be just as handy in both scenarios for us. However, in the meantime, I will not select that because we will be trying this out with a minimal API. So we are creating the project here. As you can see, we've got a little project set up for us. We just see a program file, which is basically where our API is being built. Any middleware or any services we need to add can be added here. And we've also got our Swagger UI generation steps, as well as an endpoint that is available for us to see. I'm just going to zoom in here so that this is a little easier to read. So there we go. We do have an API endpoint that we can test, which we will be doing later. Now, when we want to implement ASP.NET Core identity, the first thing we do need to do is install a couple of packages. For that, I am going to open the package manager console once, because we want to install a couple of these packages here. The first package that we will need to install is the ASP.NET Core identity package for entity framework. The reason we're going to install this package is because entity framework is an ORM that lets us communicate with our database. It's quite a handy tool. If you work with .NET, I'm sure you must have come across it. However, there are certain additional functionalities that we will need, which aren't provided out of the box in identity. So we do need to install a separate package for that. The second package that we will need to install is the entity framework package to work with an in-memory database or any other kind of database you like. This, of course, is going to be necessary because if we do want to use entity framework, we, of course, want to be able to actually communicate with our database as well, right? So I'm going to quickly install that. And for the purposes of this demo, install the package for an in-memory database. Of course, for your production environments, you should use, SQL Server or any other database that Entity Framework also supports. All right, so our packages are installed. Now, the next thing we want to do here is we will create something that is called a database context. Now, a database context is an entity framework offering, and this is particularly helpful when we want to communicate with the database. Identity, however, adds certain niche functionalities for identity that are going to help us set up database tables and rows specifically for the purposes of these API endpoints. So for now, I'm going to call this class identity context. We will quickly set this up. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, well, this we are effectively extending um, an identity, a class offered within the package we just installed, and we're going to quickly add, well, we will make sure that our database context is set up properly. These are essential steps. And by the way, one thing I forgot, for the identity database context, we will also need to, well, mention uh, our identity user class here. Now, this is mainly necessary because the identity database context will use a model for your user details to generate. It is a necessary template for our user here to kind of generate the tables for this user data. You can extend identity user to create your own version and add any details you'd like. Um, However, like in this case, we will just go with the default option. Now, the next thing we've got to do here is we want to configure our application to actually use this database context, and then, of course, add the identities APIs and activate them within our application. So what I'm going to do here is, first thing, we'll add the database context that we've got. And that was not supposed to be identity DB context, sorry. That was the context that we just created. I'm going to remove this from here for now. We then also want to quickly, well, allow this to use an in-memory database. By the way, I'm just adding the necessary references when you see that those suggestions here. That is one thing that's pretty handy about, um, well, Visual Studio particularly. Then after that, the next thing we want to do here is map the identity API endpoints that we've got. So here we will quickly also use the identity user. And what we'll do here additionally is add an entity framework store, which is the one we just created. Along with that, we also want to inject the already by default available middleware for authorization, because we will be securing this weather API's endpoint that we just saw. And the last thing we need to do here is map these identity routes. So what I'm going to quickly do now is map the identity routes here using the identity user, and we will just secure this endpoint that we have. And with that, these identity APIs are good to test. So just to make sure everything is working, we can do a final test as well. I am going to quickly deploy the application right now. We'll just make sure everything is working all well and good. So the moment I do that, you can see that we now have a few different endpoints for registration, login, confirming email, forgotten passwords, a number of different things. We're just going to do a quick little test here where we create a little user here, right? By default, by the way, this does come with a few different rules already. Like, for example, it should have a mix of lowercase letters, uppercase letters, numbers, and special characters, things like that. So I am going to keep those in mind as I test this out. And I think the cool thing about Swagger UI is that you can actually just test these out within your browser. So I clicked it once, I created an account. If I click it again, it also shows me any errors, like, for example, the fact that this email ID is already taken. Um, what we'll do here is we will quickly add this email and password here. By the way, I think the cool thing about identity API endpoints is that you can also integrate two-factor authentication if you want. We haven't done that yet. And I will say if that's something you want to do, you can explore later on as well. However, if you don't have that, you can just remove those with your and add your email and password, execute that, and that gives us the token. It mentions the token type, the access token, the expiry, and things like that, which I think is amazing. This is one of the new additions to ASP.NET Core Identity, which is you now get a token available. However, because we're in the browser, we can also leverage cookie authentication if we like. So if I click that here, this request will actually um, return a cookie and store it for this endpoint in our browser, which we can then use for our secured um, API endpoint, right? So because it's secured and we execute it, we get back a certain amount of data. Had we not had the cookie, this wouldn't work. So that's how you can set up these API endpoints. I know we're short of time, so I think I will conclude the demo here. But if you have any additional questions, we can definitely explore this later on. Um, and yeah, I guess that's good for me. Thank you so much.
Awesome, Aditya. Did you have more slides, or are you happy to
Oh
end it now?
no, this was good. I think probably the only thing I would have touched upon is an additional logout functionality, which isn't available in identity API endpoints by default because since the tokens have their own expiry, that tends to be the responsibility of a user to ensure that they're verifying. However, for cookie-based authentication, they do offer a method within the documentation itself. So I can actually send a link to the documentation for these functionalities once. If we can share that in the chat, it's probably one of the best places to start discussing with people. I think I won't be able to post the link in the YouTube chat myself, so I'm just sharing it here
Good.
um, right now.
There we go.
Amazing.
Okay. Thank you so much, Aditya, for being our first speaker and for this interesting talk.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
there's a lot more to learn about this, but this was an amazing introduction. And I
Wonderful.
see you are going right into writing code yourself, and that's a great way of learning. So people can continue down this track from here on.
Yeah, I think it's a great little. It's always fun to kind of do that, and I know I saw a few messages in the chat. Um, I couldn't jump into them, just keeping in mind the time earlier, but I would love to
Mm.
interact with anyone who wants to.
Oh,
So
so
that's my Twitter handle, and if anyone wants to message, reach out. I am always happy to have a chat there.
nice. Well, thank you for this time, Aditya. We need to prepare for our next speaker, right, Santosh?
Yes, hey Ritik, welcome to this is a learning conference and thanks for joining. And we are really excited for your talk. So we will not take much of your time. So let's go ahead and because we already like we still have time. So don't worry about 30 minutes because there is a free slot at 6 p.m. So you still have your 30 minutes. So Ritik is going to talk about multi-tenancy in Kubernetes era. So over to you, Ritik.
Thank you, Santosh. So Thank you for having me over here. So let me share my screen and get started with this. Yep. So hi everyone. Welcome to my talk. It's about a cool concept which is very popular right now in the ecosystem called multi-tenancy. And we will talk about how multi-tenancy is being featured in the Kubernetes era, or when every workload that is running is mostly running on Kubernetes. So before we deep dive into this, let's talk about a bit of me. So I'm Ritik Roy. That's my socials. So you can connect with me. I'm a platform advocate at Loft Labs, and I'm a CNSM ambassador. I also won the Google Venkat Scholarship, and currently completing my final year undergrad, and I will graduate in a couple of months. So if you have any questions regarding CNCF platform building or any certifications as well as scholarships, feel free to reach out to me on my socials. And yeah, so now one of the most important question, I wanted this talk to be quite beginner friendly. So to start, I want to start with the history of how normally infrastructure was dealt with before there was Kubernetes, before there was cloud, and build a story from there. So when there was a monolithic era, how were things about? So first you had heavyweight servers which you need to go and uh, like for example, if you wanted to deploy something, had to go and set up the hardware, the labs, as well as the servers. Next, there was scalability. So as you remember, you had to set up those servers. So you had to go and get those servers from the market or from the vendor so that you can use those to host your application. Initially, when you start out, this sounds cool because you have a server. But what if your demands keep increasing or keep is variable? Like for example, before a festive season, your demand is around 100,000 users, but during the festive season is around a million users. So you see, there is a lack of flexibility on the servers serving the number of users. So that was also one of the problems. So you can't predict and keep buying your servers. So this all kind of got solved with the dawn of cloud. So when there's cloud, there were cloud computing providers like AWS, Azure, and GCP, and they had a couple of advantages. One of those advantages was you can be more free and focus on your business logic. Instead of focusing on the hardware side of things, you can focus on what you are building. So that brought a couple of advantages with cloud. First was resource provisioning on demand. So suppose today you need a cloud compute with a 16 GB RAM, and tomorrow you need 32. You don't need to go and buy all those things. You can just provision using a portal whenever you want. Next is rapid scaling. With the festive season, you don't need to buy and understand how much you will scale. With some exceptions, cloud has the capacity to scale instantaneously. And the last one was cost optimization through pay as you go models. So, depending upon your servers and your scale, this might not always be true, but for most of the cases, pay as you go models is awesome. Like, for example, if you're starting out, you don't have the capital to invest in hardware, you can just go and start building things without worrying about another scaling and resource problems. But then everything was, and with the power of cloud, people wanted their application to scale to another parts of the world. But the problem was, even if you have limited resources, resources can go down whenever it is required, and then you need to sit there and fix the issues. So there came a requirement for something which can be a orchestrator of your resources as well as orchestrator of your service. So there came the Kubernetes. So Kubernetes comes with containers, all of them I'm bundling together. So Kubernetes is like the orchestrator. So whenever your application which is running in the cloud goes down, you don't need to go and manually check why it is gone down. Kubernetes has the function that it can create replicas of the application and make sure that your application is running 24 into 7. Apart from that, it also brought a lot of advantages like skipping the it works on my machine problems, as well as featuring containers. So if you build it on your machine, it will work anywhere you want depending upon the architecture. But again, there were some problems. If you are using Kubernetes by default, there is no multi-tenancy. I will go a bit deep in it. But apart from that, Kubernetes was going good, and currently most of the organizations are using some another form of container orchestrator. So, what is multi-tenancy? So, multi-tenancy is not a new concept. It is a very old concept. But in a summary, this is it. Common form of multi-tenancy is to share a cluster between multiple teams within an organization. So the problem is whenever you have a big cluster, it becomes very complicated to manage. For example, if you have 10 teams and those 10 teams have 10 different clusters, managing the financial responsibility of all those things is burdensome. So there comes kind of a concept of multi-tenancy where you can share a cluster, but there is a detachment from financial overloads. So before we talk about deeper in multi-tenancy, let's understand the pillars. So the first pillar of multi-tenancy is isolation. So to dive deeper into this, suppose you and your friends are running two workloads in a similar or in a different cluster. So when you are running in different cluster, you can't see each other's workloads. But when you are running in the same cluster without configuring anything and without with the default setting, that is possible. But one of the principles concept of multi is isolation. You don't want that to happen. You don't want another from another teams to see your data. Second is cost saving. The reason and one of the most important pillars is cost savings. Like for example, when you are improving and building tenants inside a big cluster, you want that to help you save cost. We will dive deeper into this a bit later. And the last is ease of management. The reason we are diving into multi-tenancy is if there are thousands of clusters, it becomes very hard to manage them. But when there is a single cluster or less than 1,000 clusters, as we go down, the ease of management is better. So that is also one of the pillars. So to talk about how that multi-tenancy was implemented traditionally in Kubernetes. So initially, what was that like when there were more clusters and it was a new concept? People used to go and create a cluster for a team or a cluster for an individual. That might sound ideal, but that has a lot of disadvantages. Some of the disadvantages: how will you understand how many clusters are running and which are important? Suppose you have 1,000 people and you have 10, so there is a possibility you have a lot of clusters, and that becomes very complicated to manage. So next wave was using namespaces. So namespaces are a virtual abstraction which is present in Kubernetes. Namespaces are very helpful because it comes and creates a way by which you can save your resources, but that has some problems as well. For example, if you go for PVC, it is not a namespace scope resource, so anyone in the cluster can see what is there. That might be a problem in some situations, but most of it's okay. Understand how big the problem is. Let's focus on security consideration as well. Suppose you are running customer data and have different teams working on things. According to some data protection laws, your data shouldn't be shared internally as well. So when you are running in something like person volume claim, there might be a scenario where your data can be accessed by anyone in the team and the data can be taken privileged off. That is the first problem which namespace can't solve. The second is noisy neighbor. This is a common problem across a lot of infra. So the problem is, suppose you have 10 gigabytes of RAM and you initially promised between two teams 5 each. Sometimes it can happen that some team is consuming more than their quota and you can't limit that as well. So that is as well a big problem. So there came concept of hard and soft multi-tenancy. So hard multi-tenancy was where you had your clusters divided, but that came in a high cost scenario. And soft multi-tenancy was where you have hardened substances, but there is more chance of attack because data sharing is there. Hard was more about cluster, and soft was more about namespaces. So there came a requirement or something which sits in name. So to compare both of them, like in the separate namespaces versus separate cluster, namespaces have very low isolation. Access for tenants is also very restricted, but in the cost, it's very cheap. Resource sharing is also easy, and the overhead is very low. By overhead, I mean how much resources, human resources, required to manage them. So it was not a question of if or but a question of how we can improve this. And then there came a middleware solution where have isolation. Like for example, here your isolation is in namespaces, but then there is a concept by which you can stop replicating your whole ecosystem. So this is the namespace one. So which was virtual clusters. So generally, what is virtual cluster? So if I say virtual cluster, as you understand, it is a cluster which is running on top of your cluster. So Kubernetes and Kubernetes, you can say. And this came as an advantage because it brings the middle line in which you get the advantages of both of them. First is the isolation advantage. You get the strong isolation and you have all your PVCs and everything restricted if you want to. Then the cost is cheap, resource sharing is easy, and overhead is as similar as your separate namespace. As you understand, you get the advantage from the separate cluster as well the separate namespace in a single solution. So so what are the advantages exactly for those? So when there are a lot of clusters, as we discussed, there can be a scenario where you create a lot of clusters and they get deleted or they are underutilized. If you have 100% capacity, you just utilize 50% capacity of 3 clusters. You're using and underutilizing your cluster spaces. And if you are running 1,000 cluster, there might be a very complicated manner to understand which cluster is owned by whom and what is their functionality. Last, autonomy. As a developer, you want your experience to be as better as it's possible. So autonomy is kind of challenged here because whenever you want a cluster, you can go to your team and get one. But sometimes that is like, so virtual clusters come in a position where you can still provision them and use that. The advantage and those is induced as V clusters. So it is a certified Kubernetes distro and it helps you run Kubernetes in Kubernetes. And the advantages are you can deploy it as fast as containers. So if you have ever provisioned a Kubernetes cluster, it takes time, somewhere from 10 minutes to 30 minutes, depending upon your resources. So vClusters are a way by which you can launch Kubernetes cluster in a way faster manner, as well as save control plane cost. We will dive deeper into this in a bit, as well as when you're using that, you have self-service capabilities. So as vClusters architecture supports having full permission clusters inside a cluster, you don't need permission from anyone else. You can create a cluster over there and have admin privileges inside the cluster. And all of this boils down to improving your developer experience as well. For example, a developer won't be restricted by using production environment because he doesn't has the enough permission, or his or her team is. So to understand the architecture a bit, let's dive a bit deeper into it. So normally what you do is you have all those resources inside a tenant. This is problematic because you are reusing all those resources. So the architecture V clusters, you have your workloads separated by a simple compartment, and all those compute which was replicated over three places is just used once. So your workloads are running over here, and this is managed on your main cluster. So as you see, this kind of improves the developer experience as well as the workload for of teams as well, because this is standardized across teams, as well as the workloads are more intensive, and you can create or delete it as soon as possible without damaging your main cluster. So focusing on the important components, f- we get the first pillar, which is secure isolation. Those workloads running over here can't eject, so you have security. Then you have autonomy. Each cluster inside the cluster has full admin permissions. And lastly, you don't need to care about the another cluster. There is clear separation, and you own everything inside it. So you have one using this, another using this, and another using this. You can create many as you want depending upon the resource. And this all boils down to having a chief efficient way to create and isolate your environments with low maintenance. So if you want to check the project, it's an open source project. Again, you can check over this QR code. I'll give it for a minute and then discuss a bit more. Yeah. Now, I will like to focus on a couple of things which the concept of virtual cluster solves. So first one is issue with updates. So Kubernetes is a fast-moving project, and there are a lot of times API breaks. From 1.19 to 1.20, your API might break. So what the problem is, like, if you're in a lot of times your organization has a lot of teams solving a lot of problems. So if all of those applications are running in similar environment and a team is not maintaining the project, it might be a case if you upgrade the project, it might break your previous application. So here having a concept of vCluster is important because it helps you to make sure your applications are running. Secondly, high cloud spend. EKS has a fixed control plane cost. Whenever you go and create a Kubernetes cluster in EKS, there's a control plane cost. And if you have 10 control planes, the cost kind of adds up very quickly. Lastly, there's an over provisioned cluster. Like for example, you're not utilizing 100% of it. So you can have multiple clusters on it. And as we saw previously, you can have a replicated platform stack. So you don't need to provision your login monitoring tools every time you go and create a cluster. That is waste of effort and energy. your virtual clusters over there. So your platform stack is consistent with the team, and you can have all the admin permissions inside it. So if you go and compare the cost over here, so like the EKS platform stacks and control planes are the most consuming. So with each of the control planes, you get a cost addition up. And with EKS, one control plane, because running all the cluster at one place, the cost is for one instances only. And then you run your virtual clusters over there. Next is platform stack. So all those observability tools and monitoring tools which are sitting over here, that is consuming resources. So if you have only one instances of that, then that saves cost. And then your workloads will run as similar. So if you see, there is a huge saving of cost because you're virtualizing your workload over there. And yeah, so this is the Slack. So if you have any questions, feel free to join Slack, and I would love to answer your questions over there. And here is me. So feel free to connect with me. And thank you. So I'm here if you have any questions.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. Thank you for your presentation, Ritik. The most active viewer was Nandini, but she's out cooking dinner now.
Oh, that makes sense. It's
What's the most frequent question about this topic you get?
the most frequent is like, is it open source? Like whenever I go to conferences, and the most frequent is like, is it open source? Is it free to use? So yeah, we are 100% open source, and you can just go and download and use it. And a lot of companies which we know use our Oasis product. So yep, that is the most frequent, which comes from a normal curious persona. But sometimes some questions are, how are people using it currently? Because adoption is a very important question which comes out when people want to adopt something. So like a lot of GPU providers are using us for creating virtualized GPU which they can use for the AI ML workloads. So that is also a very interesting use case. And we did a event in KubeCon as well, talking about how that went through and how core waves are using this.
Okay, is it part of the CNCF?
So vCluster is not part of CNCF, but we had a project called DevSpace which we have donated to CNCF. But we are not donated to CNCF, and we are owned individually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we have our next speaker ready already, so I'll say thank you again for this awesome talk, and thank you for being a speaker at the first This is Learning conference.
Thank you for having me, and bye-bye.
Bye now. And let me see if Siva is ready for the next talk. There you are. Welcome, Siva.
Hi lads. Thank you for the warm welcome. Okay. So can we start?
Yeah, as soon as you're ready, you can share your screen, whatever you need, and I will add that to the live stream.
Got it. Yeah, I'm ready. I think we can start.
So you'll be talking about kickstarting your first backend by creating a REST API with fast API in Python.
Yes, Python. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
So, can you tell us a few things about yourself, Silas?
Yeah, so I have 8+ years of experience working in Python. So now I'm doing a full stack role and a senior software role in Oracle. Yeah. So I have used Python various projects. Okay, and I have used multiple framework. Like previously, I have used Flask and Django. So for some of the projects, I have used FastAPI, and I can see some performance improvement. And now I can see there is a lot much adoption of this framework. So yeah, so then why not to talk about this thing and make it more reachable to the users?
Nice. Have you prepared some slides, or you will be coding, or a combination?
uh, yeah, so I have built a little app with some UI and the backend. We can go through that. I can see the code and how it's sorry, how the CRUD is done in the backend. Ultimately it's going to be a introductory talk. Then like we will see the possibility of doing some additional APIs in backend. Yeah.
Nice. Well, just press the present button and find the right screen or window to share, and I'll add it
Sure.
to the stream.
Sure. Give me a moment.
In the comments tab, you'll see live messages from our YouTube channel. We're also streaming to X and LinkedIn, but chat is not supported
Okay.
in StreamYard for those platforms.
Got it. Okay, I hope my screen is visible.
Yeah, we have some
Okay.
inception going on.
Okay.
Yeah, we have like sharing a screen, sharing a screen. Great. Now I see your app. Okay.
Okay.
So I will be in the background while you do
Okay.
your talk. Best of luck.
Sure. Thank you. So for any questions, I have to come back and see it in the comments. Yeah. Okay. I will be like see that as well. Okay. So hi everyone. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon. So wherever you are, yeah, greetings. Yeah, so today talk is about the building your you might be like thinking or already working on some backend. Okay, so this talk is focused on how to build your backend for a web application using Python fast API. Okay, it's going to be an introductory talk. I'm going to like I have built some a simple application. Okay, so we will see that and we will like see how we can do the CRUD operations using fast API, and we will see like we will build some additional APIs if the time allows. Okay, so yeah, of course, if you have any questions, you can just put it in the chat. I'll also like see that. Then I will also come back at the end of the session. We will like discuss more on that. Okay. So here, guys, you can see this is just an web application I have built. So here, what we can do, we can just add some context. Like if I click on the new, then here maybe I can just add TIL something. Okay, here we can just add some numbers 1 2 3 4 5, just dummy numbers. Okay, we don't have any kind of strict validation because our focus is on the backend. So I am clicking on the submit. You can see the contact is added. Now what we can do, we can just go and see, and we can just edit this contact, maybe TL conference, something like that. I will submit. Okay, okay, you can see it is edited. Okay, so now if you don't want, and if you want to delete something, you can just click on the delete button and the contact is deleted. So basically this single app, it is having these CRUD features, and all the CRUD is powered by the Python fast API backend. You can see this is like a get, and here we have this create, And here we have this edit, update. We usually call it for the CRUD, and of course the delete. Okay, we can just delete it. So yeah, before jumping, let me just check is there any questions. Okay. Okay. So we will see how the backend is built using the Python fast API. Okay. Okay. I will just go through the app structure. Okay. So here we have just to start this thing only. You just of course for any Python projects you will have your virtual environments. Then to start or kickstart, as per the title, you just need two things, that is pip install fast API, and we can do pip install of fast API, something we can see. Yeah, and another thing is UVCon. So FastAPI is a framework through which we will build the APIs, and UVCon is to run our applications. You can see this is already installed. Okay. So yeah, before we deep dive, we'll just see one thing like these fast API. So first of all, why we need this, and what is the like gains. Okay, so the main thing people adapt for fast API is the performance. So it is told that it is like giving the same performance or equal performance like Node.js and the Go. Okay, so the question is how it is doing. So it is making use of the async features of the Python. Also it is using that's why we use this UVCon to run this async framework. Okay, so it supports the async, whereas in Flash we don't have that much support for the asynchronous. When I have worked on previously, maybe they may have added something now. Uh, but still we can use the asynchronous library there. That's another thing should be noted. Okay, so this fast API is built on two things. One is Starlet, and the another is Pydantic. So Starlet, which powers this web API development. Okay, that Pydantic is for the serialization and the model building. Okay, if you like not exactly sure what are those, we will see that. Okay. Okay. Here in the left side you can see like the structure, folder structure. I would say it's a very simple thing. Okay, so we have this main.py file where we have defined all the APIs. Like it is simple to start. Like we just need to like import fast API here. Okay, from fast API import fast API, then we can directly create an app. Then we can just create a function which powers this get API. So this app is already running. So how do we run this app? UVCon main app hyphen reload. Okay, this is how we are going to run this backend. Just run it. Okay, now I will go here. It runs on 8000 port. You can see we are getting the hello world. That's what we are returning here. Okay, it is as simple as that. We will like move some additional steps. So the next thing is, which is the additional thing comes in fast API, that is like it have inbuilt Swagger documentation. For example, if you have anything like if you just go to this slash docs, you will see the complete Swagger API, which we don't want to do any additional things. Based on the API, we will just build. Based on the input, based on the output, it will just generate its docs. So it is like so easy for us to like share this information with the co-developer or any downstream like services. They will like consume our APIs. So all those things are like already we have powered by the Swagger docs inbuilt. So I will see for some questions. Okay. 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 So for this talk, the DB I'm going to use. So also it has like a support of multiple types of database. Like we have the main support is there for SQL based. We have support for MySQL, Oracle SQL, then we have the PostgreSQL as well. Then for MongoDB, like there is like a unofficial version of framework built on top of this fast API. We can use that. Then yeah, also the another thing I want to highlight is we can use the SQL Alchemy like framework on top of this, which I have used now. Yeah, we'll see. So as I told, like we have this API main.py, we have created our APIs. I will see and we will like go in step by step. Okay. The next thing is like schemas. Okay. Schema is the thing where we will define our input or output models. Yeah. Okay. Then we have another file models. Models is something we will create our database models. So basically, we will get the input as a schema object in the API. Then we will just save that using our database models. Okay. So then all those things happening in main.py, which is a controller, and database py is a file where I'm keeping the configuration of my databases. Yeah. So I will share some links of this thing. I will share some this repo maybe end of this thing, or I will put it in the command later. You can like of course grab and check all these details. Okay. Then we have another file thread.py. So this is where we are going to like write our database logics, like how are you going to write, how are you going to like read or something. So we will see the first API. We'll start with the CRUD. For example, what's happening? You can see I'm going to create a new contact number. I'll just submit it. Okay. Okay, I think I have not started it. Yeah, some glitches there. So you can see the contact is created. We will see how it is created. Okay, so basically we can see to create any contact we need a name and a mobile number, then we need to submit. So it, of course it's going to be in the post API. So how are we going to create? So you can see I have created one add contact function and decorated with the app.post method. So this is how we will create a post API controller. Okay, this is the URL we just provided. For this URL, we have this all the methods get, post, put, and delete. Okay, so then this is the place where we will provide the structure of our input. So if you see the input, yeah, create contact, we are passing the name and the mobile number, right? So you can see for to receive that payload we have to create one pedantic model. Yeah. So you may ask like why do you want a pedantic model or some kind of serializer? So like it has many inbuilt features, like it will have the inbuilt validation of the fields. Let's say if I'm not passing this name, it will say this this field is required. Yeah, you don't want to like handle this manually anymore. Yeah. So for that we are using this serializer or schema, I can say. So then we have the mobile number, we are just specifying its type, and I have set the country code. It's optional, and also I have provided some default values for this. Okay. So this class config ORM mode, I will come back to it. So as for now, to receive this payload, we have created one schema of Pydantic model. Okay, so the next thing is like we are using some default parameter here. So this is called a dependency injection. Okay, so this is used to like connect with the DB. Yeah, so I'm not going to like dive in deep of this thing, but still it is like openly available in the many documentation, and most of us know what is the dependency injection. Yeah. So this is the fast API way of doing it. Okay, so we already have created our own function that will provide our database connection. Yeah. It's just like any other framework. Okay. Then what are we doing? We just have received our payload. The next step is like saving that in the database, right? So we have created our CRUD API. Also, we'll just see what is the database structure. You can see here I'm using the SQL Alchemy. Yeah, it's a common framework for SQL. So you can see the table name I have mentioned it as a contacts. Then I have just specified my attributes here. You can see like ID, it is auto generated. Then we have this name field, whatever we get it via API, we are going to save it in the database. So then we have this mobile number field, also the country code, which we already set it as a default. Of course, we can pass, it will be overridden. We can just change it anytime. Okay. With that said, now we have passed our schemas dot contact details, whatever we have got via the API. So you can see like how are we going to create the save the data in the database. We are going to use the SQL Alchemy here. So here you can see I have imported the contact from these models. So now I'm just passing the respective variables. Name is contact.name, then mobile number contact.mobile number, country code is whatever we got it. Then yeah, we are just adding the contact in the database, and we are just committing it. So we are also like refreshing that committed object, so that we will get the ID and whatever is the created details back. So we just receive the response, and we are just sending the whatever we get the DB model as a back from the insert code. So if you see, like we are returning the DB contact, and the same thing is mentioned here as contact response. So this is where like we set this ORM mode equal to true. So that means we are sending the database object back as a response that will be like serialized by this schema, Pydantic schema. Okay, then it will be like compatible with the ORM we used. Okay, now we will see. Okay, so maybe I will just use same thing. Conf 24. I can use some mobile number. You can see it is just created, and we are just getting the response back with these details. Okay. I will look for any questions now. Okay, we don't have anything. We will move ahead. Okay, so basically that covers this part, right? This create part. Okay, you can see the one we have created now, it is available. Now we will like see the how the all the other get APIs and all is created. Okay, so we have these get contacts now. Okay, so here what are we going to do? We are just going to create one contacts API which will provide all the contacts available in the DB. So if you want to see the database, like we have this currently I'm using the DB visualizer for the SQL app. You can see these are the three data available in our database. Now if we just call localhost slash 8000 slash contacts, yeah, you can see it is like providing all our data objects database as a JSON. Okay, so how it is doing, we will see that. Okay, so here if you see, like we have created a get contacts function which is as a get method. Now we also mentioned like what is the response model we have to mention here. So it's a list of contact response. So you can see this contact is our pedantic model we have created earlier to return the response. Like we have some additional field ID, so we just need to like inherit from the contact, and we just need to like add one additional field whatever we want to add or remove. So we can do it here. Let's say if you want to just share the name and mobile number here, we can just mention like this, and this ID country code will be ignored. Or if you just want to like show the share the name, you can just keep it here, so it will like limit all the other attributes. So which is the role of this serializer? It has so many functionalities. It has the inbuilt validations. We can do many custom validations here. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I just look at the code. Now if you see, okay, so here we have some default parameter which is skip and limit. It is just a default parameter which is says like by default take 100 rows. Okay, this is just in like any other function parameters. We are just going to like use it to limit our responses. Like, okay, now we have got entered to this get API. Now what's the next step? Is like we have to take the data, all the data from the contacts table, and we have to return it as a response, right? So for that, again, we are going back to the CRUD.py. So here you can see like that the same thing is passed here or maintained the skip and limit. You can modify it. So we are going to use the make use of the SQL alchemy here. We can see like querying the contact model, and we are just setting the skip and limit, and we are just taking all the data we are returning. So this is going to be the database objects. Then we are going to receive the same in the API part, and that's it. We are just returning. So the fast APIs take care of all the JSON things and all. So now I have another methods, the same for it will just take based on the ID, then it will just update based on the ID, which is going to be the same. Also it is just going to be the delete based on the ID. Okay, so let's see how we have checked how the get works and how this post works. Let's see how the edit works, like the same functionality we have mentioned here. 24, let's say I just do this thing. Okay, I will just remove this 20. I will just make it as 24. Okay, this is very good. Yeah. You can see this edited. So how this edit works, we will see the API details. Okay, so basically we can for edit we can just pass all these details, but the change here is like we don't want all these fields, right? So what we have done here is Yeah, usually in the put we will receive all the attributes. For the patch we will just get only the additional or whatever the changed attributes. Okay, so in case of put we are just going to use the same contact object where we will receive the name and the mobile number. Okay, this is just like similar to the our contact creation part, but here we will like update it based on the id. So you can see this api path param is there. So we have just mentioned some id holder here. So we just mentioned that. Now we have received the id, we will receive the id from this placeholder, and we will also receive the object for which we need to update the data. Yeah. You can see I have created the same thing we are doing again. We are just getting the response as a identic schema. Then we are just going to utilize this CRUD.py for this update query. How are we going to update? And there we will use the SQL alchemy model and we will like return the response here. Okay. So here you can see in the update, this is the SQL alchemy way of doing it. We are just filtering the data first. But what if the ID if we are providing is wrong? For example, if it is like if you see the get all contacts, we can see the IDs are 3, 4, and 5. If I just try to update the contact which is of ID, let's say 100, it will say contact not found. Okay. So that's the same thing however we handle here. So we are just trying to find the respective contact for the ID. If it is not there, then we will just return none. If it is there, then we will like update the respective name and all the details. Then we will come into the DB and we will like return the updated data. So here, how are we handling in the main? If the DB contact is not there, then it is just simple for us to like provide the or let the users know like this is not found by saying the status code and the detail. It will tell and it will like update the user with these details they require, so that they can correct it. Yeah, or at least they know like they are doing something wrong. We have this two again. Yeah, we have 3, 4, 5 only. Okay, I think I'm doing something wrong. Yeah, you can see this getting updated. Just make it as you can see this getting updated. We will see the delete thing now. Okay, delete is something similar to the update structure. So here you can see update IPA structure is like contact slash ID. The same structure we are following here because we are using the REST API. So here we can pass the same structure and the contact slash the respective ID we want to delete, but the method will be delete. Yeah, we don't want any other inputs as like update or create. So we just like get receive the id from this placeholder or path param. Then we are going to make use of the CRUD delete contact function. Here we are going to use play with the db, like how are we going to delete this. Yeah, then if the again if the id is not found to delete, then it will just say this contact is not there. If it is there, it will just delete. And usually we don't want to delete return anything when we delete, so we are just like skipping that returning part. Yeah. Okay, let me look for any questions. Yeah, I think we are fine. If there is any question, I am open to discuss. Hi, Sudesh.
Sorry.
I think you are on mute.
Hey, Shiva. Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry. Yeah, thank you for your talk. And in case there are any question, I mean, you can share your social media handle. I mean, people can reach out there.
Sure.
So, what is the best way to reach out to you?
LinkedIn will work here. I will just share my handle here.
Yeah, good.
I will put in the chat.
Mhm.
Give me a moment. It is asking me to log in.
Okay. No worries. For online, we have now a short break, and yeah, so Shiva shared his LinkedIn handle here. I can just share it. But we now have a short break from till 6:30. We will be back for our next talk at 6:30 p.m. And meanwhile, you can join for our raffle. So we have also have a giveaways. So in case you want to be like become part of that, just go ahead and register. We'll share the link now, and we'll be back again at 6:30. We'll be talking about benefits of using hash nodes, headless CMS for your blog. So see you soon. Thank you, Shiva. And
Thank you
Shiva,
so much,
just don't
Samosya.
just don't disconnect. As Lars already mentioned in the chat, you need to stay here till your video is uploaded. So you can look at the recording tab and just keep and watch.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah. Bye bye. Bye bye. Hey everyone, we are back, and let's welcome our next speaker. Hey Lau, how are you? Can you hear me? Hello, hello. Oops. Uh, hello.
Test, 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 test.
Yeah, I can. Hello, can you hear me? Oops. Uh, hey. Oops. Why? What's happening here? I can see.
Test, 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 test.
Okay, just give me a second. Audio. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I hear you now. I'm sorry.
Uh, can
That
you hear
was
me
my
now?
fault. Yeah, I can
Ah,
hear
okay.
you.
Okay. Sorry. Let me just move on to another mic. Uh, uh, okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So hey everyone, welcome back after break. So hope you are using the coupon codes which we have shared. There is
Mm.
code provided by Brett. So in case you are looking for some resources on Angular and or React, he has a 50% discount. We also have a promo code for InfoQ Summit in Munich. So in case you are planning to join, there is a 35% discount. And don't forget to join the raffle so you can get the chance to win free books. And let's welcome our next speaker Law on the stage. So thanks again for your time. Thanks again for joining. And we are excited to have you here. And Lo will be talking about modern C Sharp, dive into the community's most loved new feature. So I have someone who has been a .NET developer. I'm really excited. So over to you, Lo. I'll not take much of your time.
Sorry, what was the question?
No, I said I was a .NET developer before, so I'm really excited.
Oh,
for you
okay.
to-
I thought I missed the question. Yeah, I love .NET as well. I made my career out of it, so I think that says enough.
So yeah, over to you. If you want to share your screen, I can just hide it and then you can take
Yes,
over.
absolutely. Let's do my entire screen because we also have code that I have to show you. Mm,
Great.
Can you see it normally?
Yes, I can see your screen and everyone can see screen. So
Okay, awesome. Because I have my notes here and I don't want you to see that.
yeah,
But
I can see your notes as well. So just in
oh,
case
okay.
you're not planning to share it, you can move.
Otherwise, it's so duplicate slideshow. Does that work? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
perfect.
that's better. Okay, well, welcome everybody to my session about modern C# development. I want to talk about C# because it's really my thing, and I think that most people, when they think about C#, is that they think about old-looking code, ugly-looking code, lots of template code. And I'm going to show you a couple of ways in how to make your code cleaner, how to make your code more modern. And I asked friends and people online what they really liked about the new C# features and how they have been using it, and I want to show you that in a quick demo. So let's get started. So who am I? First of all, I want you to meet me so that you know what I'm actually talking about. I'm Luella Kremers. I'm a Microsoft MVP for developer technologies. I'm also a .NET developer, and you might know me on Twitter as a content creator about C# and .NET and silly dad jokes. And today I'm going to talk with you about modern C# development, and then mostly the new features that are really based on the language. So we're not talking about how to make web applications, how to make APIs, but we're really talking about the language itself. So you can use it no matter what you're building. So there are different C# versions. For people that don't know, we are on C# 12 right now, which came out last November. And the November before that, it was C# 11, and the November before that is C# 10. And we keep getting a new C# version every year. With this means that there are new features every single year, which means that C# keeps renewing itself, keeps making new features that are more modern, are more clean, that you can use with whatever project you want to. And this is done with the Roslyn console. So C# runs on the Roslyn, and Roslyn is actually an open source project in which you can see all the different features that have been made by the community to run on C#. So if you go to the Roslyn repository on GitHub, you can see what features are being worked on, in which state they are, on which branch they are, who are the reviewers, who is working on it, and what does the community actually think about new features. So here you can see the features for C# 12, for example, but there's also one for C# 11, C# 12, C# 10, and you can see the discussions about these features, if it's a good fit for you or not. And sometimes it also happens that features that are being worked on right now actually get excluded from the next version because the community doesn't like it, or something gets added to it because this community really wants it. And that's how C# keeps getting better every single year. So there are quite a lot of new features that have been added over the last few years, and some features that have been expanded over the last few years. These are a couple of examples. We have ref fields, we have date-only, time-only records, name of parameters, file scope namespaces, top-level spaces, static lambdas, required members. These are things that you can alter of your existing project and that you can either replace or refactor to make your project better. And some people use it, some people don't, but there are also a lot of developers who don't keep up to date with the newest features, and I want to help you with that. So today we are going to talk about the new modern features. So I asked people, what are your favorite modern features, so that I can make a good demo for you, and this was the result. So I'm going to talk about date only and time only, records, pattern matching, file scope namespaces, top level statements, switch expressions, and if we also have some time left, I also want to look at primary constructors with you. I think we have enough time because I have 30 minutes, but we will see. Oh, that's too far. So let's get started with my demo. Let's get to the fun stuff. Okay. Can you see the IDE? I think so, right? So this is how you're used to see if you start a new project, maybe. If you look at older C# versions, this is what you're used to, right? Like, I can see part of my screen, okay? The namespace, for example, that's in brackets, and a class program, and a static void main with a console white line in there, or whatever logic you need to put in there. This is kind of the starting live space for your console app in C#. But I want to show you what it actually looks like nowadays with C#12. So I'm going to start a new project. I will just keep it console app 1. We'll put it in this file. And I want to use a top level statement. That's the first feature we're going to talk about. So let's create that. So this is pretty much it when you start a new project in C#12. So you can tell it's a very big difference when it comes to template code from the old version. And if you want to put this in a class, that's fine as well. I can just class program and put it in there. It's not an issue, not a single issue. You can do this if you want to. Of course, there needs to be a method around it, but this is possible as well. But it's very, very minimal, and that's because of the top level statements. So you can get rid of this and just work with this. And if you want to add another console white line to it, also possible. It's not an issue. This is great, for example, for scripting, quick small projects, quick small files that you need. And it's just very awesome, very easy to use. And if you want to add a class towards it, you can do this. And as you can see, the namespace also doesn't have to be in brackets anymore. If you see the old version, there's a namespace in brackets. You don't need that anymore. You can just do a namespace and then a semicolon and then the class under it, and that works fine. It gets rid of a lot of template code, which is amazing. In my opinion, it's amazing. So if you have this kind of project, for example, and you want to convert something to JSON, what you can have, for example, is an object with a constructor and a private string above it, and then you want to convert it to JSON. And because you want to convert it to JSON and back again, you need the system.text.json package, right? And maybe you also need using system.globalization, for example. And then you have to repeat that for another object and another object. You don't need to do that either anymore, because you can just create another class. Best practice is to call this global, because we are going to use global usings instead. So we're going to do global usings. And what we can do is say global using system.text.json. Just let it live in here. Global says that it has to be available for every single file in this project. So this also means that you can now get rid of the system.deprecation everywhere. You can get rid of this one, you can get rid of this one, and this also cleans up your code a lot. Because, for example, if you have 5 of these different packages, it will still get rid of 5 lines, and it's all just imported into the global.cs. So I can also add global using system.globalization in here. I can do global using system.buffers in here. I can add whatever I want. If it's an external package, I can enter it in there as well. And it should be available for every single project file in this project. So let's move on to actually one of my favorite features, which are records. I love records. And to show you this, I have a normal person class. And in this person class, I have 2 properties, first name and last name, and I have a very basic constructor that sets these values. And then in program, I can call it, and I gave it my own name for simplicity. So new person class is Lou Kremers, but this can be easier. So what can we do instead? Well, we can create a public record. So public record, person record is new person record. Let's see, whatever do I do? Do I have something in here? No person records. Nope, okay. Okay, let's just move on for now. I'm sorry. I don't remember what the code was, and I didn't save it either. Oh, okay. So instead, let's move on to date only. We'll get back to this later, maybe. So in date only, what we can do is just only put in dates. And what does this mean? This means that we don't need date time anymore. We don't need to put in date time all the time, because that was a hassle to always have to put a date and a time in there. And instead of that, we can just now do date. So date only current date, if I want to use that, I can do just date only from date time and then date time now. And in this case, we have the normal current date. We also have a custom date that I can very well use. So that's new date only, and then put in the year, the month, and the day. This is the standard format. It's the format you always have to use. And we also have a custom date that I can repeat. I can edit it. I can do whatever I want with it. And I also can, of course, print it. I can either print it like current date to string, and then it will use the normal feature. It will just print it out. Can I show that? Yes, it will do 65, 2024. But I can also do to long string, and then it will give me the full date. This depends on whatever settings you have on your computer. If you are in the US, it will look differently than when you're in Europe, because of course I have different settings. The formats are a little bit different, but Thursday, 16 May 2024 makes sense for somebody who lives in Europe, like me. I can also do math with it if I need simply the difference between custom date and custom date 2. There are only 4 days in between that, and I can just very easily give it a variable and check how many days are in between there. Can also do that with months, can also do that with years. And I can also use conditions. So I can very easily say, okay, if current date is bigger than custom date, so if this is later than the custom date, it's later. If it's earlier, and else the dates are properly the same, right? That's what I can do. And I can also very easily change calendars if I need to change calendars for people that are, for example, interested in the Hebrew calendar or the Japanese calendar or whatever calendar is not the standard European, international, American one, you can very easily change that up for this. So that makes this very nice. And another one that's also comparable date only that you can do is time only. I love time only because I hate different time zones. If you have different time zones, it can sometimes be kind of an issue to compare two times, or it can be an issue with different users around the world. Well, you might not need to because you simply need the time for example, a desktop alarm or for something small in your applications where time zones really don't matter. In that sense, time only can be really easy for you. So it also works similar to the time only or the date only, where you can give the time only from datetime now. And also if you have an older datetime object, you can also very easily convert it to time only or date only by using this and then just putting the variable name in here. Then you have time only custom time, where I put in a normal number. So the hour, minute, second is always the following up that you have to use. So it's always hour, minute, second. And I can easily compare the two if I want to. So like date time of a date only, I can again do I can compare the two, like you saw in date only. I can do math with it, and I can also just easily do the if-else statement again. So if current time is bigger than custom time, I can do this. If the current time is smaller than custom time, I can do it's earlier, and else the time is the same. And I can, of course, print it whenever I like. So I put in a format of hour, minutes, time. And if I want to print that, I can do this. And hopefully, as you can see, it says it's 8:16:40 p.m. Well, that's correct according to my clock in the bottom. So that is how you can use that. And then we're going to move on to switch expressions. I hope all of you know how switch cases work. It's a condition checker. And to check conditions, you normally use a switch case if you have multiple if-else cases to make it a little bit easier. But you can make it even easier with switch cases or less smaller. So in here, I have a public record to do. So we have a to do with a string title, a date-only deadline, a priority level, and the bool is urgent. As you can tell, the priority level is already a class, and that's in here. That's the enum with a high, medium, low. And what I can do now is that I have a program, and in this program, create a demo for meeting. So I have a to-do object, and I want to print whatever comes out of get solved time. And we have a very basic switch to do the level. So if the priority level is high, return this, return this, return this. But we can make it even smaller. So you can do it a very basic one, which is this one. Oh, okay. Well, it's inside a variable now, or inside a method now. Let's make that a bit more clean. Demo switch basic. Okay, that looks better. So here we now have the same exact thing as that's up here, but it's a little bit more clean. So as you can see, we have a return to-do level switch, and then priority level is high, return this. Priority level is medium, return this. Priority level low, return this. And if there is nothing, or if it doesn't correlate with any of these values, it's an unknown priority. So that's an option. It can also be a bit different if you want it to be. Let me show you another example, which is the switch basic hard. If I, for example, want to compare two values in the to-do object, right? Because we have level and urgency, so I have priority level, and a bool is urgent in here, and I want to compare them both. What we can do is we can just put it in here and return a string or return whatever else we want. So if priority level high is in there and it is urgent, very urgent high priority. If priority level is high but it's not urgent, it's urgent high priority, it's an urgent high priority, and that can continue on like for eternity. If you want to add another value to this to also check in your to also check as well in here, you can add it here for whatever you want, and also add it here and make even more options in your switch case, and it still stays very small. Because if you have to do this in a normal switch case, it will become huge. So that works as well. Let's see if it actually prints. No, get solve time too. Okay, that works. Then I need to remove this and call the right switch expression. Yes. So what did I put in here? I put in high and is urgent is true, so it will look true here. Its priority level is high, is urgent true. Very urgent high priority. And if it couldn't find any of these matching cases, it will go to unknown priority. So then we go into something very interesting that can help you actually matching different kind of values. For example, if you don't know if something is a string or if something has the right constant, you can check it with pattern matching. So for pattern matching, I have here a public record grid point with int x and int y. And with that, I have a program with var point, which makes a new object with new grid point 2 and 3. And for the constant pattern, I can show you how we can compare one string and see if it's true or if it's not true. So for that, I'm going to do constant pattern. 1 second, demo constant pattern, yes. So var message is constant check. If message is constant check, console white line message. It's very simple. We can just check constants, for example. So I can also make this a2. And if message is 3, is 4, it will write message. Of course, this will not write a message because the message here is 2 and the message here is 4. But we can do this with every kind of data type. Then we have a type pattern. So with a type pattern, what we can do is check if the types are right, or if the data types are what you expect. So in here, if point x is int, so if this point is as you expected a 2, it will write some value between 0 and 9. If it's string, it of course will not print. So this is a very easy way to see, okay, is this the data type that I expect to have? For the var pattern, what that looks like is like this. For example, if you have a mixed list, if you have a mixed list of objects where hello is a string, and of course this is an int, and this is a bool, and this is a double or a float, you can very easily check, okay, is this an actual object? Is this the object that I expect? And with that, I can see, okay, if item is for X, then type of X is XGet type. So this is, of course, is a var. So this will go true. And a new one that's very interesting is a positional pattern. This one was added in C# 12. And it works very well. So what this actually looks like. You can do this both in a switch case, and in an expression. So you can do it like this. So if point is above zero, x is above 0 and y is above 0, then you get a point is in the positive quadrant, or else if, or else. This is an option. But also if you want to do it in a switch expression like we did in the prior demo, you can also use that as well. It will look something like this. So string status is point switch, where if x is bigger than 0 and y is bigger than 0, the point is a positive quadrant, and point is at the origin or point is at the negative quadrant. This works perfectly fine, and this is a very easy way to check multiple values. And then, do I have time for primary constructor? I do. So primary constructor is a great way, an almost functional way to create a better or cleaner way to build a constructor. So this is a very basic constructor class. I've seen it before. So we have a private string first name and a private string last name with a constructor in here, and we want to return the get full name. This is a lot of text. This can be a lot of text, especially if you have a lot of fields that you want to put in there. It can become a very big class. So what can we do instead? Well, instead we can do a primary constructor where we put the strings that are originally up here. We can put that in here. And what we can do is then just put the method in here that we want, and then we don't need this whole part anymore. Now, the only thing that is an issue or can be an issue with primary constructors is that it's mutable. So private strings don't work in here, neither do read-only strings. It just always has to be mutable and public. And also, if you want to create another constructor, this is not possible. You always have to refer to this and just fill this up. So then this primary constructor points to this one. They are working on making that better in C# 13 in the next version, but it's not there yet. So just keep that in mind. And with that, I'm through with all my demos. I want to quickly see if I can see. Yeah, okay. So to get back to, where is it? Primary constructors, nope, records again. So what I can do instead of this is that I can do public record person and put in here string name and string int grade, for example, and then do for, let's say it, person record is new person. So it calls up to here. I cannot do that. Whoops. Okay, well, whatever. And in here, I can put a name value and a greet, which is an int. So I can do this 3. I can do person record instead, I hope. Yep. Okay, this works. So instead of having a whole person class in here, which has an init and constructor, instead I just have this line. And that works. I can also compare it in value. So instead of comparing person class to person class 2, and then having that come back as false because it's stored in a heap, so it's stored on different kind of places in your memory, which comes back as false. You can also just do person record and person record 2. And if you compare these two values, it will come back as true because it's value based. So that's very nice if you have, for example, a DTL or a database object, or if you only care about the value and not where it's stored in the memory. A person record can be very easy to use and also be a lot less lines. So to get back to my presentation, where is it? Duplicate slideshow. If you want to keep up with the latest Roslyn features and the latest features that are coming to C# either next up in November or have been in the past and what people have been talking about, with those features, you can go to this short rule and keep up to date with it every single day and maybe even do some open source contributions yourself, which is awesome. And with that, thank you for listening. Here are my socials. You can also find these slideshows and my code on there as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a great talk. I mean, I haven't touched .NET in like years. It's been a decade basically. Last time I wrote .NET was in 2017, and of course I can see like how much it has improved. So thank you so much for going through all these features.
No
So
problem.
yeah, and in case anyone has any question, just feel free to follow Love on Twitter and LinkedIn. We will share the
Absolutely.
link. Yeah, we'll share the link. And Lo, just don't disconnect. I mean, your
Yeah, okay,
recording
I
will
will
be
stay for a
uploaded.
bit.
So yeah, so just wait in the backstage, and once recording is completed, I will let you know, or you can just see if it says uploaded, and then we can disconnect. And
Absolutely.
thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, and thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time again. Yeah. Ito, can you switch on your camera? I mean, if possible. I can see you are here, but hey, hi. You're on mute. So yeah, hey, hi. So thank you so much for joining me, though. And we will not take much of the time. And let's start with the next talk. And it is about optimizing web animation for performance. So a very interesting talk because this is something which a lot of developers struggle with. Like whenever it comes with the animation, you're like most of the websites which I have seen struggle because of the performance issues, right? And that's exactly your talk is about. So all the best, and over to you.
All right.
And do you want to share your screen?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Sorry, can you hear me properly?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, cool. So I'm sharing my screen now. Okay. Okay. Um, Sorry, just a minute, please. Stay with you. Sorry, please, can you confirm if you can see my screen, please?
Okay, I have added it and we can see your screen. So I'll be in backstage, Ido. Over to you.
All right. Okay, hi guys. Okay, I think we're good to go. Yeah. So hi guys, welcome to my talk. So today the particular topic what we'll be looking at is optimizing web animations, right, for performance. And the whole idea around this talk is just to look at some best practices, right, and some best method of handling animations on the web, because you could agree with me, right? Animation is amazing. Animation could make your application stand out on the web, right? But you also need to look out for some details, or you have to look out for the reasons of adding those animations. Okay, so that'll be the general idea around this particular talk and what we'll be going through today. Um, yeah. So the next slide. Okay, so my name is Evergreen. Currently, I'm a software engineer with a main focus on the front end, where I get to build front end applications and collaborate with a lot of teams distributed around the world, right? Um, when I'm not coding or when I'm not working, I mostly put out content on my YouTube channel, which you could check out at Ido Evergreen. And also, you could follow me on GitHub at EvergreenX. Now, the first question that comes up, right, in this particular talk is, do you really need animation? So the question is surrounded around, if we really need animations for your application, do you need to add animations? Because you could see an application, right, where there is no animation, but it does the basic things, right? It does what it's supposed to do. The features work. But you could see another application, right, which has a lot of animations, and it also do what it's supposed to do. So do you need animation? Do you need to use animation in your web applications? Okay, so the first question you should be asking yourself when working or trying to integrate animations into your web application, are this particular animation supporting the user journey, or are we just adding this because they look trendy? So what does this mean? Are we adding the animation to this application to give our user a good user journey, or to give our user a good user experience, or we are just adding this just to look trendy and to look like we are very updated and stuff, right? Cool. So it says animation serves as a valuable means to simplify and communicate complex information and concepts. So the general idea around animation, of why we use animation, is to simplify and to communicate. So for example, you go on a site, right, a landing page where you want to buy a particular product. You get to see this nice animation, which is trying to convey the message of, okay, this particular product is very good for you to use, right? So animation could be leveraged, right, in this particular situation, to simplify and communicate, right? Now, if your animation doesn't do this, if the animation you have on your site, right, it neither be a product site or a basic site, if your animations doesn't serve as a means, right, to simplify or communicate, I think at that point you should be considering taking out that animation, right? Yeah, cool. Then the next slide says, um, not all animation is useful. Yeah, not all animation. Now you could agree with me. You've gone to some sites where you see um a lot of animations, and the animations are very disturbing. And what do I mean? For example, you go on a site and you could and you realize that the scroll ability of your browser has been hijacked by this particular website, right? Okay, stuff like smooth scrolling, and it has been hijacked, so you might not really be able to have the full ability to control that particular web page, right? So it says here, say not all animation is useful. Very correct. When used well, animations can communicate, right? They can communicate a whole lot more descriptive. So if your animation is used in the correct way and in the correct manner, right, your animation can convey the message and could also communicate to your users. Yeah, to the next slide, it says it's crucial, however, to exercise restraint and also intentions when incorporating animations, prioritizing the user experience above all else. So when you're working on animations, or when you are with a team, right, a team of developers, and you guys are considering the kind of animation you want to integrate to your web application, it's best advice for you guys to sit together and ask yourself the question: is this particular animation? Do we need this animation for our user experience? Are we adding this animation to this our application to improve the user experience, or are we just adding this because we feel like we need to add it? So there needs to be a discussion that needs to go across teams. And when I mean across teams, I'm talking about from the designers to the front end developers, which obviously are the one that they are going to be building out these features on the web application. So there needs to be a constant conversation back and forth on the kind of animation that should be used on the particular application, right? So your animation should be aiming for to improve the user experience, right? And if it doesn't do that, you don't need that animation. Now, going back to our topic, which is more about performance, right? So it says animation can affect um your page load times and override site performance. So you all could agree with me, right? You've basically gone on sites where, for example, you try accessing a website, maybe on your desktop or on your mobile devices, and the particular application is very laggy. And when I say laggy, what do I mean? I mean it's very slow, right? Most of the items on the pages are not getting loaded. Because why? A lot of animations were being used. So if animation is not done correctly, right? If the animation you have on your site is not done correctly, number one, it's going to affect the page load time. It's going to affect the site performance. And now, let's take for instance, you have an application, right, where you have bad animations. And when I say bad animations, I'm talking about animations that affect your load time. Now, we could all agree, right, as users or as end users, we don't want to waste our time on applications, or we don't want to waste our time on a particular site. Oh, I'm trying to access your product. I need to be able to access your product as soon as possible, right? And I don't need to spend forever trying to access your site, right? So animation could affect those particular metrics, or that particular part of your application, because it's going to slow down your application. You won't be able to have users that will actually use your application because the animations are distracting, and the animations are basically affecting the site performance. Okay, so it says clearly states the purpose of each animation and how it supports the overall user experience, right? So you and your team of developers and also designers, you guys should basically have a conversation around how does this support our user experience, and how is this going to actually help our application have a good user experience. Yeah, to the next slide. Now, there are some key metrics, right, which you could use to which we could use to evaluate our web animations. So basically, these key metrics are just ways to be able to know if our animations, if the animations we use on our application are actually performance wise, if they are affecting our users, or if they are the best animations, right, that works on the particular user device. Yeah, one more thing, I just wanted to point something out here, because I don't know if anyone has realized, but when you're trying to access a particular application on your desktop, and this particular application, right, has a lot of animation. Now I'm talking about web applications, right? The animation might actually look good on your desktop devices, right? On your browser, maybe Chrome or Firefox. Then if you try accessing the same animation through your mobile devices, right? That particular animation might be very slow, because of why the user end device might be a very low ended device, which might not be able to might not be able to have the good performance to run those applications, or to be able to run those animations. So let's just look at the key metrics to evaluate our web animations, right? It says, okay, cool. So let's look at the metrics, right? So the number one metrics we could look at here right now is the page load time. Now it says the page load time basically measures how long it takes for the main content of the page to load. So for example, you go to a site www.example.com, right? The particular minute it takes for that particular animation to load up, right, is being referred to as the page load time, right? So it measures how long it takes for the main content of the page to load. Now, the second metrics which is being laid out here is the FTPS, right, which is basically the frame rate. So it's been advised for you to monitor the frame rate to ensure your animation runs smoothly at 60 FPS. So the general idea around frame rate and your animation is to make sure your animation are actually running at 60 frame per second, right? That is FPS. And if you have an animation that runs, for example, 30 FPS, it might actually look very laggy to your users, and such animations are not realistic to your particular users, and it could also affect performance. Then the third metrics to watch out for is the CPU and the memory usage, right? And basically, you have to track how much CPU and memory are being used by your animation. Then thirdly, it says the network performance. It basically, we have to analyze the size of the animation files and their impacts on the network performance. Yeah, I'll take this again. The page load time, the the FPS, the CPU and the memory usage, the network performance. So these are basically the four metrics you should look out when you're trying to optimize your animation. Because number one, you could have a bad animation on your site that affects the load time, that affects your application to take a lot of time before it loads up, right? The second one, the frame rate per second. If you're having a very bad frame rate per second, right, for a particular animation, you won't be able to have this smoothness and this crispy animation on your web application, and this could also affect your performance in a way. Now, CPU, if you don't track how the CPU and the memory are being used by your animation, this could also affect your performance. Because, for example, if you have an animation which consume a lot of CPU and GPU space on the user device, right? Number one, if you have such animation, that could affect the user GPU, and also affect the user battery. Because why? The user battery gets to like run down very fast, because the CPU is making use of a lot of memory than it's supposed to use for that particular site. Then lastly, it says network performance, right? Just to analyze the size of animation files, if you're making use of images, for maybe images from CDN or images from other sites, right, and how they could actually impact your network performance, right? um Now, 60 fps, right, like we mentioned, always make sure your animations are actually around 60 frame per second, because the browser we make use of, right, the user browser, for example, is being rendered at 60 frame per second. So your animation needs to be at least 60 frame per second to get the best frame rate per second, right, for any animation you're actually rendering on the web. Else, you might fall into the trap of having bad performance based on your animation. Okay, so it says use performance tools, right, to assess the impact of animations on page load times and responsiveness. So this is basically saying that we should make use of tools. So, for example, you and your engineers and your designers had some discussion, right, about, okay, we want to add this particular animation. We feel this animation is going to improve our user experience. Um, then the designers are done building out this particular animation. Then they hand it over to the engineers or the developers, and they are done building this particular animation. So they are basically tools you could use to assess the impact of such animation. And these tools, what these tools does for us is to be able to read real time, right, how this particular animation affects your page or affects the user page. And one more thing I need to point out: when you're working on animation, right, where you can, always try to stick to working with just transform and opacity. So even in time past before now, you've tried working on animations on the web. You must have realized a lot of issues with animation that has to do with, for example, you're working on an animation where you have to start changing the position. For example, you have an animation where you say, okay, for some duration of time, I want this particular animation to move from a position of relative to the position of absolute. Now, in the animation world on the web, right, it's best advised to make sure that when you're trying to work with animation, you should always try to stick with changing the particular state of your item just based on transform and opacity, right? Now, you might be wondering, what if I want to do other stuff to this particular element on the web? What if I want to change the location? I want to change the duration, or I want to change the speed. Now, your transform and opacity gives you the full ability to do all of that. You basically just need these two values, right, to animate any property on the web. And by this way, you'll be able to have a very sleek animation and a very performance good animation, right? Cool. Now tools. Remember, we talked about performance tools of we using them to be able to track our animation, if they are fast, if they are reliable, and if they are very, very, very useful to our users. Um, Now, the number one tools I want us to look at today is the Google Page Speed Insights. So it says it provides insights on page performance, including how animation affects load times, right? Before now, I think most of us must have actually make use of this page speed to check out our particular web animations to see how fast they are and how we could actually have maybe good scores about our applications that has to do with maybe accessibility, or maybe making use of JavaScript, right? JavaScript that are not being used, or CSS that are not being used on that particular animation. So it's good to know that you could also use your page speed insights from Google, right? To to actually look at how animation affects your load time, right? And the second tool which you could use to assess your animation on the web and know how they are performing is the Chrome Dev tool, right? We as web developers or web engineers all have experience using the web dev tool, but I'm very sure very few of us understand how to, very few of us understand how to make use of the performance tab, right? So it says the performance tab in your Chrome Dev tool, right? It allows in-depth performance analysis, including, remember, frame per second, your FPS, CPU usage, and rendering time. Now imagine this, if you ask me, right, this should be the best tool if you need to have a lot of details, or you need to have um, performance analysis of how your particular animation works, or how it's particular performing based on the user browser, right? Because from the dev to you have access to the FPS, you have access to the CPU usage of your particular animation, you have the rendering time. So with these values, you should be able to determine if your animation is slowing down your application or slowing down your users in interacting with the most important items on your web applications, right? So this is just a preview, right, of how the performance tab looks like. I think we should all have come across this before on Chrome, right? So the performance tab, this is just it. You have access to checking out the CPU. You have access to also checking out the network. You could make use of network like 2G, 3G, 4G. So you could test your applications on different um, network, right? And also you could test out CPU on 2x, 1x slowdown. Yeah, so like that's just general idea around Chrome Dev 2, because you could use the performance tab to tweak your animation, to tweak the performance of that particular page, to see how the animation affects the load time of that particular page. Yeah. Then I think the last tool is just the GT metrics. It's just we basically use it to analyze load times and provide recommendation for performance improvements, including animation optimization. So with GT metrics, you could also use it to to improve your animation, to improve the performance of a particular page. And that's the general idea around using GT metrics on trying to assess your animation, right? Now, cool. Now, animation libraries, right? Now, why I had to put in this particular part of the slide is because if you're working on the web, mostly we as web developers, right, mostly make use of CSS to undo our animations, right? And or you could be in positions where you want to make use of JavaScript to maybe hide or show some item on the page, do some animations, slide in and slide out. It's not best advised to use your vanilla JavaScript, right? Or to use your JavaScript framework to handle your animations, because number one, it's gonna bring a lot of issues to performance, to speed of your users. It's gonna affect the performance of the particular site. And we have animation libraries which you could check out, because why you need to check out this animation library, because most of the heavy lifting has been done for us. For example, if you make use of Framer Motion, you know that Framer Motion will always run at 60 frame per second, right? And GSAP, Pop Motion, Motion One. So these are all the libraries which um you could use to have good performance on the web, because most of these abstractions has been handled for us on these libraries. Yeah, so lastly, it says animation can evaluate your design, but only if it serves the user and doesn't compromise performance, right? So make sure your animation doesn't compromise performance. Make sure that no matter the animation you're adding on your particular page doesn't affect your users' performance, because at the end of the day, your users want to make use of your web application, and they don't want a lot of setback when trying to access such applications. Yeah. I think at this point we've come to the end of this particular talk, and thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Evergreen. It was a nice talk about the performance. As we mentioned, like many people like they struggle with performance when it comes to uh, the animation. So thank you so much for your talk. And as we mentioned, just don't disconnect. Just wait till the video is uploaded. And thank you again for your time. Thank you. Okay, so hey Divine, I think Minal, you can take ahead, and I'll just be on backstage.
Yeah.
You can hear me, right?
I'm audible. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're audible. You can hear me, right?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly.
Okay, good. Hello. So
Yeah.
our next speaker is Divine Odazi, and I think you're going to talk about multi-cloud database deployment and why and how do we do it using MySQL. So would you
Yeah.
like to, regarding, besides the title, what all we will be covering in detail today? Would you like to tell about that?
Yeah, so maybe I can start by presenting my screen.
Okay, okay. Sure. You can go ahead. I'll be in the background if you need me in switching the screens or anything. Okay.
Okay, yeah. So, hi everyone. My name is Divine Akachukwu. So today I'm going to be talking about multi-cloud database deployment, the why and the how, using an example of it's MySQL. So I have 30 minutes and I'll try to go straight to the point. And yeah, let's go. So a little bit about me. I'm a technology evangelist at Several Nines, a database automation provider. And also I'm a passionate technical writer. I've written over 100 technical articles in the last 3 years. I dabble in Kubernetes, certified Kubernetes application developer. Also work with AWS, and I'm talking about databases today. So I'm a database enthusiast, and I'm excited to speak at this is learning conference. I think this is the first this is learning conference. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity. So about this talk, right? So we're going to start by talking about what is a multi-cloud database, right? Talk about the use cases, look at deployment, right? Which is the use cases is the why, and deployment is the how. Then we talk about maintenance, right? So because beyond deployment, so there's the two operations. You have to keep your database alive. You have to keep your applications alive, right? So audience, your users can use it effectively and have that high performance, right? A well-performing database. So let's start by stating the obvious, right? Multi-cloud it's in the meaning, is in the name, right? Multiple different clouds, and over 89%, according to this state of cloud report, right, where 89% of enterprises operate on multi-cloud, right? At several times, we use multiple clouds, right? And I know several people personally that use multiple clouds. So what is a multi-cloud database? I think you get the idea already. It's a database deployment that operates across 2 or more clouds, right? So this can be like on a public cloud, right? Public clouds, private clouds, or a mixture of both, right? So you can have like one on a database on a public cloud, also have another on the private cloud. And public cloud is just I can define it simply, right? So like a shared, your basic AWS, you create an account, is a shared multi-tenant cloud, right? That how you share operating system and hardware functionalities with other users. In private clouds is like a dedicated server, dedicated hardware just for you, just for an organization. Then any type of database is a candidate for multi-cloud deployment, right? So there are also like cloud native databases that are built from the onset to be distributed, right? But databases is not a new thing that's been since the creation of software. Since software started, right? There have been databases. So these all databases have been available long before can also be implemented in a multi-cloud environment. So going on, use cases of multi-cloud database. So disaster recovery. So organizations need to safeguard against major outages. So you could ask yourself, right, I'm deploying on AWS or I'm deploying on GCP. What's the worst that could happen? It can actually happen. And I don't know if you're listening to this now or watching this later, you read about the news of GCP losing the entire cloud environment of a particular organization and how they had to do disaster recovery from another cloud, right? So that's a typical example. So it eliminates any single point of failure, right? And that single point of failure is something that can like break down organizations. Because when your cloud goes down, when your application goes down, you don't only lose money, right? You also lose your reputation, lose users. So also environment optimization. So improve application performance, right? So that also works in line with reduced latency. So deploying your database close to your users, right? So it reduces, latency, right? How long will it take for the user to get that information, right? And decreases overhead cost. So being dependent on one single cloud, right? So you can be paying a certain amount for an instance at a particular time, right? And they can be price change. Yeah, they will actually tell you long beforehand there will be a price change and all. But when you're being dependent on that particular instance, on that particular environment, right, you can't easily just shift, right, without a multi-cloud deployment from the onset or implementing it in preparation for scenarios like this. Hence, me talking about price change over time and better support for mission critical functionalities in the sense of disaster recovery. So most of these use cases, they kind of overlap with each other and complement each other. Then scaling out, right? So they can actually be shorted of specific instance type, right? I've seen a lot of that when you need instances from AWS, or if you're using a smaller cloud service provider, CSP, you need a specific instance and it's not available because okay, you're in a multi-tenant environment, you're sharing server with some people, right? And you need a specific instance, you can't get it. So that's the challenge, especially when you're scaling, either through marketing efforts or you just launch a new particular product or a new particular feature, right? And also cheaper option, which aligns with environment optimization and decreasing of overhead costs. So, some AWS has a different pricing, GCP has a different pricing, Azure has a different pricing, Civo, and all other CFPs. So you can get the cheaper option, particularly for your needs. And there's also what they call like another important reason for like scaling out, right? Implementing multi-cloud deployment when scaling out is cloud busting. So in scenarios where like, okay, you're in a private cloud, organizations are in private cloud, and they kind of see like overflow of traffic, the increase in traffic due to something, let's say it's an e-commerce platform, right? And there's a lot of it's Black Friday, right? So there's a lot of users coming in and making purchases. making transactions, right? Which these are queries are being run to the database. This takes a lot of like that increases traffic, increases load on the database, right? And a private cloud is kind of like it's kind of like it's dedicated instance. So you with a multi-cloud deployment, you can actually scale easily to a public cloud, right? And that like helps you to still keep like that peak performance and well performing database. Like you still providing the same value for your users no matter the time. Then also control over data, and this is what we've been seeing lately, right? Organizations need to stay ahead of regulatory changes, right? And you have the GDPR in Europe, you have the CCPA in California, several regulations, right? When you have sensitive data, you can't take that data over like the country, right, or out of the state, or especially in EU. So like, how do you do that? How would you like deploy your database in the sense of that, like you have different users scattered across the globe, right? Or will you start? You have to kind of implement some multi-cloud deployment in order to cater to those regulatory requirements and changes, right? And also removing vendor locking, and we'll talk more about that later on. So this is a key thing because environment locking dependency, and I kind of highlighted that in environment optimization, right? So if you're stuck in one cloud, you can't easily move. If things change, you kind of like stuck. And licenses change. I don't know if you are listening, have been active in the database space. So it is the time when Elasticsearch changed their license, MongoDB changed their license. So, and also general knowledge, HashiCorp recently changed Terraform license, right? So that kind of stuff like happens, right? So when license change happen, you're not really dependent on one particular cloud or one particular kind of database implementation, right? Then you can easily move, or you're implementing some open source. Then that is why we see the rise of what we call sovereign DBaaS. So sovereign DBaaS is freedom to put your database anywhere you want, use any instance you want, and also like manage your database how you want, right? And if your needs change over time, you can easily like, okay, revert, right? And sovereign DBaaS gives you absolute control, absolute accessibility in the sense that you know what makes up your database, right, from the operating system level to monitoring level, and like all these are not being abstracted for you. Yes, abstraction helps, right? But abstraction, like we talked about, can bring about locking and several like technical issues, right? So we'll discuss more about sovereign DBaaS later on in talk. So these are the use cases of like a multi-cloud database deployment. There are several other use cases, right? And most of them kind of overlap. And your multi-cloud database deployment will depend on your use case, right? And we'll talk more about that later in this talk. So moving on, deploying a multi-cloud database, right? So this is a question: is deploying and managing multi-cloud database easy? The short answer is no, right? So it sounds like, okay, is it the database utopia, right? Everything goes well, my database is up on multiple clouds and all, like, just like think about microservices, right? So it's not easy to deploy a microservice. It's not easy to manage a microservice, right? From an application perspective, but organizations still do it because of the use cases that are like are clear and which for multi-cloud databases are highlighted. So that gives you an understanding of like the example of microservices give you an understanding that it's a challenge, right? It's not easy, but the benefits, the use cases, the advantages outweigh the challenges, right? They outweigh the disadvantages somewhat. So moving on to like how do you deploy a multi-cloud database, right? And every cloud provider, most cloud provider provide you with kind of like managed DBaaS, right? So we have AWS, Amazon RDS, Azure as theirs. We have GCP, Cloud SQL, right? So they provide you with that, right? But then again, how will you move that across several clouds, right? So there's replication you can for streaming data over database instances, but mostly it's focused for the data imports, right? For moving data and not for scalability in the use cases that I talked about. And it kind of like there's significant limits to the things you can and cannot do. But if you look at like building with compute instances, right? So your compute instances, so you're just getting the hardware, right? So an Ubuntu server, a Linux server, or a Windows operating system, right? Or a Red Hat server, right? And you deploy your database on that. So it easy flexibility, right? And intercloud connectivity. It gives you more control. The idea of sovereign DBAs, right? You can make changes, you can modify things as you need, right? Or you have the option to leverage cloud provider tools, right? Which like you can use CloudFormation or any tool provided by a specific cloud provider, or you can use open source tools. You can also use tools like Terraform, right, to deploy those instances and stuff. And you can also have a cloud agnostic setup in the sense that cloud agnostic doesn't depend on a specific cloud, and you can actually use this tool to orchestrate or control your instance, right, on different clouds, and also monitor your instance. So we'll talk more about that. So now, looking at the previous slide, it looks better, right, to use compute instances. But then again, these are multiple compute instances on different clouds, right? So that is another challenge. So how would you do that, right? So looking at that, before we talk more about that, let's look at the steps to deploying, the talk, using an example in MySQL database. So you first of all have to configure cloud credentials, right, for your DBAS or for your instance, right, to enable ports in order for SSH access, for backups, and MySQL uses port 3306, right, for database deployment, right? So you deploy your database on your primary cloud provider, deploy VPN for secure connection, right? Because you obviously don't want to have like your IP address and your ports and everything open to the internet, right, and public. And you choose your replication type. So the synchronous replication, asynchronous. So you can look at it from the English meaning, right? Synchronous means the two database instances, right, from different clouds are kind of like in sync. Then asynchronous is okay. Time after time, data is shared, right? But this now is not like 1 minute, it's milliseconds, right? Milliseconds, right? Then create the replica on your secondary cloud and connect that, right? Then launch a load balancer to like manage traffic and route requests, right? Whether read or writes, and which you want to be your primary database. Then deploy monitoring tools, because you need to know what's happening in your database. So all these steps, right, and looking at, okay, multiple compute instances, and like it's the best way to go in the sense of control, in the sense of actually being available, meeting your use cases, and being your database having high availability. So like, how would you go about it? So you have two options: manual deployment versus cloud agnostic tooling. So manual deployment, right? I think you already get the idea, in the sense of you have to set up connectivity between each cloud. You have to manually store the database on each instance, right? You have to configure replication between the clouds. You have to configure backup, restore, and so many other things you have to configure manually, right? Or you can use an agnostic tooling like cluster control, right? So, remember I talked about using an cloud agnostic tooling, and you only have to worry about connectivity, right? Because connectivity, that is like security, it's like zero trust, right? The idea of zero trust. So you handle your security, you handle your connection, right? So you know that, okay, the tool provides you an SLA, so but SLA, which is like service availability uptime, but then again, you manage like how your database, your connection. And there are several tools to use that, right? And talk about the VPN. There are several VPN tools. We look at that. I don't know if you heard about WireGuard, right? There's also TIL scale and implementation that uses WireGuard. So then you automate the rest, right? So you automate the database installation. And we look how the cluster control does that. You handle like replication across each clouds, right? It handles replication, failover, backups, observability, and so much more, right? Which saves time right? And like gives you that expertise, because when you manually do stuff, you're configuring a lot of configuration files, doing a lot of edits. Okay, when you want to maintain maintenance, and now that brings about also key person dependency, because okay, if the person that set up the manual process initially leaves the organization, so what will you do at that point? So let's just look at an architectural diagram using cluster control or multi-cloud DB clusters, right? So we have a VPN setup with WireGuard, right? VPN gateway on AWS VPC. Then we have an environment on AWS talking to being controlled by cluster control, and also connected to an environment on GCP, right, with the Google Compute instances. And also you have a local, maybe a private cloud or a local data center. You also connect cluster control to that, and you have all these instances, right, across different data centers. They communicate with each other, right? And cluster control handles the management of your database. And yeah, so let's just look at a quick live demo on how cluster control does that. So this demo, so I already have a cluster control environment. So basically, an EC2 instance, right, that is a primary cluster, and we're going to add a replica node, a primary instance, rather, a primary node for the database. We're going to add a replica node to the database, right? And that replica node is deployed and maintained on DigitalOcean. All right, so let me just go out and share this part of my screen. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay, you can see my screen now. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I have a cluster control deployment, right? So cluster control offers a community a version that you can use free forever. So this is a multi-cloud MySQL replication. So currently, this just has one node, right? So this node is deployed one node. This is primary node. This is deployed on AWS. So you can note this IP address. So I go over to my AWS instance. You can see same IP address, right? So this is not secure. You shouldn't do this in production, but I just work for demo purposes, right? Because you need to set up a VPN, right, and make sure that you should use a private IP address, right, and not like have your public your IPv4 address exposed to the public, right? So this database is running on AWS, right? This particular node instance running on AWS. Then I have another instance, right, on DigitalOcean, right? As you can see in my screen, I have an instance on DigitalOcean. So now you can note the IP address. So I'll just copy this IP address, right? Ideally, you should be using an FQDN, right? The domain name or host name, right? And also implement the VPN. And then I can just go, right, and to make this a multi-cloud database truly, right, I can add a new replication node. Let me zoom in. I can add a new replication node. So add replication node. So instead of manually, you have to like actually set all these node configuration, right? Enable the ports and like set all this configuration. The cluster control kind of does that already for you. So the data will be streaming using ports in range. See the ports data for streaming and for setting up backup. And we talked about setting up the ports earlier on in the talk. So you just go then, okay, do I have a backup I want to rebuild from? If my backup can be on AWS, can be on any cloud. Okay, what type of replication? I set semi-synchronous replication. Then also my database version, right? Cluster control will install the same version as the primary cluster node. Right? Then I continue. And the only major thing I have to do here, right? Because I have set up the connectivity SSH previously, I just like add the IP address of the node and wait a few minutes for cluster control to sync via SSH with the node on DigitalOcean. So just wait a few moments, should be And cluster control does this through passwordless SSH, right? So I've set up passwordless SSH, right? And you set up a VPN, right? That connects with your VPC, or let's say you have your AWS VPC, like you saw the architectural diagram. You have GCP VPC, right? You have your local data center. So you set up access, right, from each instance, from cluster control to the instances. And you see, we have a green screen. Green screen shows that it's working. It's not red. So the demo gods are with me today. So you can see the values, like the configuration of the instance. So you see it's a 4 gig RAM instance, and based on input Ubuntu. Then I click continue, overview my configuration. I tell cluster control, install the software. So I want cluster control to install the DB, right, for me. I want cluster control to I didn't set for load balancer. I want it for semi-synchronous replication. This is the DB version. This is the primary node. And okay, this is what the secondary replication node I am deploying. Then I finish, then the job gets started, right? And within a few minutes, you see that like you have your instance running on that particular node, and you can go and look at like, okay, what cluster control does. So first is checking the SSH configuration, SSH access, okay, checking firewall, okay, does cluster control have access to deploy, to install MySQL on this node, right? And it does all the configuration, and it runs for a few minutes. You can see the job spec, right, which is just the JSON of the configuration. And after a few minutes, we're setting up new node, install software through, so it installs my SQL. And also, cluster control also gives like monitoring, right? They're talking about observability from the start. So you know what's happening in your instance, right? Load average, CPU usage. And also there's so many features, right? Well, just use this to show you how like you can go multi-cloud easily without having to actually tweak a lot of configuration, use a lot of scripts, like which can like kind of like go haywire in the sense of like key person dependency. So key person dependency means that, okay, whosoever set up that infrastructure, like, okay, how many people knows how to maintain that, how to set up that, right? So we can come back to this later when the node is up. So let's just go back to the talk. So yeah, so that is how simply you can go multi-cloud with the tool, like with the cloud agnostic tool like cluster control, right? There are articles I can share for like broader production real world deployment, right? So, but let's go to the next. How many minutes do I have? Less than 4 minutes. So maintaining a multi-cloud database, right? So these are key activities. You need to set up monitoring. Cluster control for this demo has done monitoring for us, right? So what kind of alerts should you set up? Database health, cluster health, replication, queries. Some queries may run longer. Do you need to optimize the queries? It's putting more load on the RAM, like CPU usage, RAM swap usage, disk usage. So setting up those alerts, right? And as always, when you're investigating any issue in software, so you actually need to start from logs, right? Check up host system health. So that is majorly how, like, depends on the specific issue you get from the logs, right? Once you have proper monitoring set up, so cluster control uses Prometheus, right? You can also use Victoria Metrics, right? You can use any open source Prometheus like monitoring tool to implement your monitoring, and like that gives you like full life cycle of your database from deployment, right, to maintenance to day 2 ops, and also scaling. Like you just see, we just actually scaled by adding a replication node, and now if you see that, if once the node gets added, right, and the process completes, you see that if I stop this primary node or something happens, right, on my AWS instance, right, or AWS availability zone that I deployed my instance on, there is automatic recovery, right, failover to the replication node, and you still have that uptime, and this is running on another cloud provider. So that gives you that disaster recovery experience. And let's say you have this provider on, like this multi-cloud, this setup, right, is on this DigitalOcean environment, it's on a VPC in San Francisco, right? But yeah, I have my my EC2 instance on US East, right? So you see that flexibility, that uptime it gives you, that a high availability it gives you. Then moving on, best practices, right? So there's a whole lot to cover, but we're just putting it on a glance view. And so firewalls, VPN, right? Security, encrypt data at rest in transit. So you have to do this manually if you're doing manual deployment, or if you're using a DBAS, right? You can get database data at rest, right? But you know the constraints of using a DBAS for multi-cloud, right? And also role-based authentication. So a cloud agnostic tool like Console Control actually gives you that kind of like feature from the onset, in the sense that you have encryption at rest and in transit during the database installation. Everything is installed, and you can use LDAP. So LDAP, we are an Active Directory that you already use for your application to actually use cluster control. So you use same credentials, both for the credentials you already use, right? When you use cluster control, you can also use the same credentials to log in. Also scaling, can your database scale, replication, adding a load balancer, read and write, vertical and horizontal scaling, automate where possible, right? So that is it, right? You shouldn't be, it's 2024, you shouldn't be adding so many manual processes, right, in your environment, except somewhat for like security reasons, in the sense of connectivity, right? You should automate everything, rest. And even on that, I mentioned using a tool like Tailscale. The Tailscale abstract a lot of those processes, right? But then again, you have control. You can also use open source tooling like Headscale, which is an implementation of an open source implementation of Tailscale control server. So reduce latency in cloud connection, right? Because these instances are in two different environments, right? So latency can be an issue. This is something you have to keep in mind, and also so you will not have lags, right, in replication. So in the sense that your replica node, your replica, which is like a secondary node, right, that is supposed to be like for disaster recovery or for like feeding data to other users in like a specific location, right, is no longer in sync with the main node, right, which makes you lose data and have like defeats the whole purpose of multi-cloud. Implementing observability, automates health checks, right? Governance, right? You have to comply with GDPR, you have to comply with HIPAA and so many other regulations. Backups, like I mentioned with the example of a backup saving an organization, right? You need to store backups in multiple locations. You need to verify backups that, okay, before you implement the backup. I know personally I've been in a situation that I implemented a backup, but that backup was not actually like it didn't, the backup failed, right? And everything, like I had to do everything from scratch and try to get my environment from like I had to get from a later back copy, which needed I had to make so many writes. I had to get back my data to the current version of the environment. Then using automated tools, right? So you can use Terraform, right, for deployment of those instances. Cluster Control has an implementation of the Terraform, has a Terraform provider, and which can bring DevOps practices to your database deployment. And with all this, keeping it in mind and like using like a industry standard automation tooling, right, and cloud agnostic tooling, you can deploy a multi-cloud database and provide the best value to your users. And that is it. I hope I made it in time. Okay, 2 minutes ahead. Thank you for your time. And if you're interested in sovereign DBAS, you're interested in databases, and you're interested in learning more about like multi-cloud and all, so I run a database community called the Sovereign DBAS Community, right? So if you can join, you can message me out there. We can share you articles to learn more, and we can also talk with so many like other industry experts that We have people from Starbucks and several organizations in the community that are doing stuff on database using Kubernetes. That's a whole different topic entirely. And you also learn and also get feedback and help on challenges you're offering. So yeah, so that's it. Thank you everyone for listening to this talk, and I hope this was helpful. And yeah.
Yeah, that was a great talk, Divine. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll be preparing for the next speaker.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, Edris. How are you doing?
Hi, Minal. I'm doing great. And you?
Yeah,
How are you doing
so
today?
I understand. I'm doing great too. I'm doing great.
Yeah.
So we see you'll be talking on building the future web from websites to the apps with JavaScript. So
Yes.
yeah, go ahead. The screen is yours.
All
You're
right.
ready, right?
Let me share. Yeah, let me share my screen real quick.
Yeah.
Entire, then share, then boom. Voila. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, it's
Sorry,
visible.
please, can you confirm you can see my screen? Oh, cool. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining my session today, where we'll be talking about building the future of web from websites to decentralized application, all with JavaScript. Right. So this session is in two categories. The first part will go to like the presentation, some of the tools available to you as a developer or as a JavaScript developer with the JavaScript or TypeScript skill set. And then we'll also talk about some of the um, benefit or like why you should leverage or double down on your existing skills without having to learn another, entirely new skill set, right? And then finally, the other part we talk will do like a quick demo, where you get to see some of these tools we talked about during the presentation in action. And I also have like one cool stuff I'll be adding at the end of the day, where we could interact directly with the blockchain, because of course we're talking about decentralized applications here. Right. So my name is Idris Olubisi. I'm a software engineer and a technical writer. I currently work as a developer advocate for Interrupts Lab, working on Axela. And you can find me on Twitter as underscore Olanesoft and any other platform as Olanesoft. Yeah, let's proceed. So I don't know if anyone could remember this website. So this is World Wide Web. I know you might have already guessed that something similar to like the very early days, right? This is one of the first websites built, and then everybody was really excited. At this point in time, we had everyone is a consumer. If you have access to the internet and you're able to access any website, you can only consume information, read about information, and then on the back end, there are admins, uploading content, and that's all you could do as a user to interact with the web. This is where everything started in the first place, right? We began to see like innovations around, oh, now we have the internet. What are some of the cool things that we could do leveraging the internet? And also because things evolves over time, and then it's rapidly moving very, very fast. So the early days is like this, and then, but there was a concern, right? I want to quickly share a story about John. In this case, John is a developer. John also learned how to use programming languages to build amazing websites, just like the one we saw in the previous slide, and even more sophisticated websites. John is a skilled developer. John learned how to code HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. John tried TypeScript, and then at the first time, he wasn't comfortable with it. But going forward, he find the language really interesting and became really comfortable with both JavaScript and TypeScript. And then John has been hearing about, decentralized application like Web3 and all of these things, but John did not know how to get started in this space. John did not understand if he's going to learn a completely new language to be part of, the World Wide Web, which is related to decentralized world for building, decentralized application. John wasn't sure if his current skill sets
is still something he can use or double down on in the space. John is really curious. John is always serious. And then John has like so much curiosity around how the web works, how to continue learning and upskilling. But what exactly does John need to upskill? So let me take you a step back, different from John's story, right? In the beginning, which is the example I gave earlier on, where we have the Web 1, and then everybody, as at the time, were just consumers of this content. So this is coined as Web 1, where literally everyone on the internet, as at then, just read content, just consumed content, and that's all we could do interacting with the web. Then we have the era of Web 2, which allow you, which is an improvement on Web 1.0 that allow you to do more than just reading content online, making social interaction, commenting messages, sending messages, getting response, like posting, doing all of this cool stuff. A typical example is like platforms that we are currently using today, and social media platform and all of these popular platform that Twitter, X, and every other platform, right? This is a typical example of Web 2.0. And then finally, we have Web 3.0, which does not allow you to just read and write, but also allow you to own what you put online, right? So the reason why I'm kind of taking a step back is to tell you how everything started and then where we are today and then what the future looks like. Remember, the topic is building the future web and then telling you how things moved over time from websites to decentralized application. But then in this case, we are going to be looking at JavaScript. So in the Web3 ecosystem where we have read, write, and own, think of it like, let me give you one typical example here, is what I mean by read, write, and own is we all know Medium as a platform where you could write, you could, paywall your content, get subscribers, and do all of those things, right? And then there's one platform called Mirror.xyz that allow you to do the same, but then in a decentralized manner. So you don't need to have like a centralized authority that help you paywall and then remove a particular percentage. You can directly have all of these on chain and then use as your subscribers get to pay you directly for those contents they are subscribed to, right? Which is cool, right? Because you get direct access to your subscribers and then they don't have to pay any centralized authority or like pay them for hosting and all of these things. So you could get access to funds directly. And this is just an example of a blogging platform like that use case that I could reference. But then I think you guys get the point, right? So now we have read, write, and own. So let me talk about in the Web3 ecosystem, what exactly do you need to build application that interacts with the blockchain, and then what exactly are decentralized applications. So let's talk about decentralized application. For short, is dApps. A decentralized application is a type of distributed and open source software that runs on peer-to-peer, blockchain network rather than one single computer. Right. To summarize all of this, this is just telling you that it's an application that is built on the blockchain. So when I mean build on the blockchain, you could have like the blockchain side of things where you write and deploy smart contracts. I don't want to go into really detail on smart contract because the idea here is to show you how to interact with dApps or how to build your own dApp with JavaScript, right? So let's say we have like a contract. If you are familiar with the NFT space, you can, a typical example here is the Bored Ape NFT that is really popular. So if you have that NFT contract and you want to interact with the contract, so what do you need to interact with the contract is building a platform that can talk directly to that blockchain, right? And that platform is called a decentralized application because you can interact with the blockchain, you can read data, you can do all of this cool stuff leveraging the blockchain technology. I believe you guys get that. So now transitioning into Web3 with JavaScript. So you already have, for example, the short story I gave earlier on about John. John, who is already a developer, he has like skill sets building with HTML, JavaScript, and TypeScript, and then he wants to transition to Web3 with that particular skill set. So what are some of the things available to you? So if you have a front-end skills and you you want to transition into Web3 and your front-end skills is around, JavaScript, of course. What are some of the things you need? So you know HTML, you know CSS, you know JavaScript. Cool, right? These are typical tools or like tech that you need to build front-end application, which is still the same way you would build a Web2 application, like a normal web application that we currently use in the Web2 ecosystem. So if you have skill sets in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, congratulations. Like all of these things are something that is transferable into the Web3 space. Right. Another one is if you have experience with React.js, which is a library, of course, it means that you are also welcome to transfer those skill sets into the Web3 space. All you'll be doing is to build a front-end application that talk to the blockchain, and then you can transfer all of these skill sets if you already have them in the Web2 space. And then beyond, React and React.js, if you have skill sets in maybe Vue.js, which are some other library, you have Svelte.js and some other cool front-end library. Cool, because all of these things is with JavaScript, and then you can leverage all these tools or this library to build a decentralized application, which is a website that directly talks to a blockchain. Build data, write data, and do some amazing stuff, and also build things that does not even interact directly with the blockchain, which means you can interact, like you can build a custom UI, a very beautiful looking UI, and then you should be good to go. Now, let me talk about transitioning to the web. So in John's case, right, John learned HTML, CSS, and JavaScript and TypeScript, and then he's cool with it. He has been doing like CSS stuff, designing stuff on the web. But then if you have done something way more than John, maybe after doing front end, you also transition into back end, and you have skill sets like your JavaScript and or your TypeScript, and you also have Node.js skill sets, right? It's also good. It's also welcome because there are some hybrid application that you could build, leveraging these exact tools and then using those tools to build a decentralized application that interact. So the idea here is the traditional way. What are some of the tools that you are using to build your current, web that we have right now that is transferable into the Web3 ecosystem to build a decentralized application? And all of this is centered around JavaScript. So there are so many other languages that you could think about, but then this presentation is basically covering, JavaScript ecosystem, what you can do with JavaScript and all the things you should know, right? So if you have this backend Tesca, welcome. You can transfer all of these skill sets to build really amazing application in the Web3 space, which is decentralized application. So how do you know the right tool to use, right? So there's one thing for you to know that, yes, you can use these sets, you can use this tool, this tool, this tool. What are some of the right tools that you can use to quickly get you onboarded and without having to worry about like roadmap or like a particular curriculum or trying to Google things around on your own regarding the tools? Of course, you still need to Google things around if you need to do some specific function that you don't know at first. But then the point is, how do you know the right tool to use when you are transferring your skill set from the web ecosystem to the Web3 ecosystem? So building decentralized application with JavaScript tools. So I want to talk about these that are available to you. So just the expectation is for you having JavaScript skill sets and all of the tools like languages I mentioned earlier on the front end and back end. Ideally, what is advice is that you leverage those skill sets and then just focus on like the front end side of things. Don't worry about the blockchain. You have to pick up another language to learn how to build like contract on the blockchain. But then you can interact directly with the existing contract that is deployed on the blockchain. So if you have your JavaScript skill set on the front end, so let me just quickly talk about some SDKs that are available to you for free to use by just doing npm install or yarn install, and then you should be good to go. First one is Ether.js that allow you to interact directly. So what this package is doing basically is to abstract some of the things you need. So instead of doing like the granular stuff, you can just call like functions directly on this package and it will help you do all of this. So what are some of the things that you can achieve with it, like reading, interacting with the blockchain, writing, updating, and doing all of this cool stuff? Another one is Web3J, which is also similar to JS, but then maintained by different organizations. And also WAGME. So one cool thing is that all of these packages are open source. You can contribute even after using them. So it's cool. It's something you can play around with. So another one is AcceleRJS, which is also a package, a JavaScript SDK that could allow you to run Acceler query if you are dealing with like interaction and doing your gas estimation and all of these things on the front end. And we have Moralis. They also have SDK that allow you to read and write on the blockchain. In fact, more than read and write, but like getting like transaction history, transaction data, and so on. And then we have Alchemy.js that does similar thing with some other functionalities. So what about development? So those are SDKs. What about development environment or like tools that could be useful for you as a developer with JavaScript skill sets? Right, we have Hard Hat, which is a development environment. So let's say I want to build an application. They are online IDE that you can use to build decentralized application. But if you want to build a proper application that can allow contribution from external guys, and you're not the only one working on it, and you want to do things like testing, deploying, compiling, and doing all of these processes before you go live, then you need something like Hard Hat. We have Hard Hat, we have Truffle, and then we have Scaffold It. Why I added Scaffold It here is because with Scaffold It, you already have like templated UI that is already like TypeScript. So what you just need to do is to install that particular UI, and it's going to like dump a sample code for decentralized application that you want to build. So you don't have to like reinvent the wheel from scratch. You just need to pick like components to use in your application. So now let's talk about front-end libraries. What we just mentioned is the development tools that you need and SDKs. Front-end libraries, yeah, of course, front-end. We have something called Create Web3 dApp. It's also an npm package that you could just install, and then it's going to spin up a full-fledged project for you to build your application. One cool part is that all of these things already have like component that you could leverage on. So which means that you can continue using your existing skill set as a JavaScript developer. And then we have Uniswap Web3 is also another package. We have the Startnet React. These are also packages that you can leverage that already have like, if you have a JavaScript or TypeScript skill set, you can continue building without having to worry about learning new languages. So let me talk about integrated. I briefly talk about, IDs, online IDs before now, where you could build application online. So one of them is Remix IDE, which is Remix Integrated Development. It's an online environment that you can do things on the web and then deploy and be cool with it, right? We also have Chain ID. Then of course we have Visual Studio Code, which we all know. We have Eatfido, which is an online tool. We have Tenderly Sandbox. We have Sublime Ethereum. I think the only one different here is Visual Studio Code that has to do with like your local, but every other one here are like online. You can build things and then you should be good to go. So you might all of this with JavaScript. Yes, everything with JavaScript. All I've been talking about, all I've mentioned, the tools, everything is with JavaScript. And don't forget the whole concept of this talk is talking about the feature web and also what you can do with decentralized application with JavaScript. So let me quickly show you a demo. This is going to be very short. So if you want to like follow along, you can scan this QR code. It's going to redirect you to the GitHub repository. And on the GitHub repository, you have a README that contains step-by-step guide on what you need to do. But for this purpose, and because I'm running out of time, we will just go ahead and clone this project, try the smart contract deploy, and then connect the smart contract to the front end of the application. So let me switch my tab right now to Studio Code, right? So this is what it looks like when you clone the projects. Let me zoom in a little bit. So when you clone the project, this is what it's going to look like. We have like the Hard Hat, which contains our contracts. You don't have to worry about that unless you are just curious, because it uses Solidity programming language, which I didn't talk about during this presentation. So let's focus on the JS side of things. And then if you check the index.js, this is where like a lot of magic is happening. I mentioned like these packages that are available to you. So in this example, I'm using Wagmi, which is one of the example I talked about. And I'm using like all of these, familiar React Toast packages that you can use, Rainbow Kit, which is also another package that allows you to connect your wallet to be able to interact with this dApp. And yeah, we have like contract addresses, which I mentioned that once you have your skill set, you just need to interact with contract addresses and then you should be good to go. So these are the contract addresses I'm importing here. This is typically what, if you're familiar with React.js, this is what a React.js application looks like. But there's one thing I want to point to you here, which is very important, is how to interact with the chain. Right. You can see that I'm using use prepare write hook, which is an hook. This is a hook that we got from Wagmi. So what we just need to do is to specify some of these details here and be able to interact with it. So what I'm doing here is I'm interacting with a smart contract that has a send message function, and I want to be able to send message from one protocol to the other. So I've specified the contract address. In this case, is Binance, and then I specify the ABI, which is the application binary interface for that particular contract, so that I can interact with it. And then I'm calling the send message function, and the function takes an argument, which I'm already passing here, the destination chain, the contract address, and the message I want to send, and then this value, which is used to pay gas. So if you're familiar with Web3 space, you need to pay gas to interact with the blockchain if you are writing to the chain. So yeah, you can see that we are using another hook here, and then we await some responses here. If it's successful, we move on, and then we created a function here that allow you to send the message directly, which triggers the write function, and then you have a toast notification here. These are like UI things that you can transfer your skill set from Web 2 to Web 3, and then to build decentralized application, and you should be good to go. And another thing I'm doing here is to read destination chain variable, because after sending the message, I want to be able to read and be sure that the message has arrived in the destination chain. So what I'm doing here is to read those data on the destination chain. And then I have like the use hook here that I'm calling the read destination chain, so that I can, once the page mounts, you get to read those data by default. And I'm also tracking if the call is successful after sending the message, then it should make a toast notification and tell me as a user that that message has been sent successfully. So, and every other thing you see here are like UI thing. So let me show you what the UI looks like real quick. This is what the UI looks like. So when you clone that particular QR, when you scan that QR code and you directly you clone the project, this is what you're going to see. So what I'm going to do here is to just send a message from chain A to chain B. So this is what the UI looks like. All of these things with JavaScript. What I'm only doing here is interacting with the blockchain and being able to send message from one protocol to the other. So this is what the response will look like. But I'm going to do a test right now, and then you should see another message. So I'm sending TIL Conf here, and then I've connected my wallet. That's why you're seeing it here. So let me click send, and then you see sending message, and I can sign this transaction. And then after signing this transaction, it's going to wait for a second, and then you should see a notification saying that message has been sent successfully. But then remember that this is on-chain activity, right? I've sent it from Binance. I'm supposed to receive it on Avalanche. So one thing I'm going to do to show you, to keep track of what is going on chain, is to copy the transaction hash and then go to testnet.scan.io. This is an explorer that used to track your transaction in real time, how it's going from the source chain to the destination chain. So I'm just going to paste the transaction hash here, and to be able to verify how things are moving from chain A to chain B. So you can see it was sent here, gas was paid successfully, it was confirmed on the Axelar network, and you can see information like the BNB chain, and then the destination, which is Avalanche, the sender, the contract, the estimate. In fact, when you scroll down, you see like a lot more information about what is happening on chain at every stage, right? So this should take 1 or 2 minutes to approve, because this is an on-chain activity, and not just on-chain, but also a cross-chain activity, which is happening from one chain going through Axelar, then to another chain. So let's just wait for this to approve. It should approve in 1 or 2 minutes. So you can also find like other information about the transaction here, and you can verify everything is happening. Because you're doing from Binance to Avalanche, then you should see that this is Binance. If I click on it, it's going to take me to a new URL that says, this transaction was sent, and you can see it's 1 minute ago during this session, and then you can find every other detail. You can see the call that we made, the send function, right? And it's showing my address here. So, but then this is just approved and executed end to end. So now let's go back to our application here and then try to switch wallet to Avalanche because that's where we want to read our data from. So all of these interaction, switching, doing all of this are typically what you could do with JavaScript, and then you could do it and you can do it very easily because now we are interacting with packages that help us interact directly with the blockchain. And you can see, yes, so it's updated, sent from Binance to Avalanche, and then we have the TIL conference message that we just sent a few minutes ago. So now let me go back to the presentation here. So this is up once again. You can scan this QR code. It's going to redirect you to the entire code base. You see how things is done, how things are done, and also some of the learning that you take the entire project to build your own project. So what SDK do we actually use, or what SDK do we have available to you to allow you to interact and also allow you to do some estimation and other query? We have if you want to use NPM, then you can use NPM Axelar Network, Axelar GS. So why am I talking about Axelar GS here is because this particular example that I gave, sending message, not just interacting with the blockchain on one chain, sending message from one chain to the other, which means that we are interacting with two different networks, right? Two different blockchain, and then packages that you can use to leverage, to do some JS or like reading data, doing gas estimation, get transfers, doing some other Axelar query APIs that are available to you is by installing these two packages. I'm sorry, this single package either with NPM or Yarn, and then you should be good to go. So yeah, so this is one. This is another QR code I encourage anyone that just we just went through this all this together. Please scan this QR code. Tell me what you think about this session. If you find it helpful, let me know, and also how this has helped you understand how to build a decentralized application, or like the journey from the website era to decentralized application era, and also leveraging this JavaScript skill sets. And of course, feel free to reach out to me if you have any question, concern. I'll be happy to help you. Thank you very much.
You are on mute.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
No, I think Minal is on mute, so she was saying something and.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. My bad. I was saying thank you for the talk. We actually got to learn a lot. So
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. And I was trying to keep to time as planned.
Oh, thank you for doing that. So thank you so much, Aris. This was a
yeah.
great talk. And people, I mean, if you want to go ahead and give some feedbacks, just scan the QR code. And we are done for the day, man. So wow, it was like a great
Yeah.
day, and I think an amazing end of the day. It was a great talk. It is again. Thanks for your time. Thanks for joining us, and thank you, Minil,
Yeah.
for yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Mina.
Minil.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Satosh.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank
we will
you.
be back.
Yeah.
We'll be back tomorrow as well. So we will start again at 4 p.m. CET. We will have our first keynote from Martina, and meanwhile, you can just use the QR code which is displayed on the screen to get some discounts on the Angular courses from Breakbelt, and you also have a QR code in case you want to attend InfoQ Summit in Munich. We have 30%, 35% discount which is going on, and we will be also doing some giveaways tomorrow. We have some free books from Pack to give, so just register for the raffle. We have also already shared the link, and have a good rest of the day, and probably good night to most of us. Probably we'll go to bed
Yeah.
after this. So thank you again, Minal. Thank you for your time, and if you have anything to share, you can.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. The schedule for tomorrow will also be shared on social. So yeah.
Yeah.
See you
And you
tomorrow.
can just go to tlconf.netlify.app. All the latest schedule is updated. I think we just need to make one more change, but it should be it. Yeah. So Divine, just don't disconnect. I think
Okay.
you are still uploading. So just be at the backstage. Minal, you can leave if you want. I will be here.
Okay.
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 See you.
Okay.
Bye
Sure.
bye.